Mr. Hearing Officer, it is 1:15. Can you hear us in Pecos Hall?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome, great. Here in the Albuquerque area, Mr. Hearing Officer, we are experiencing a thunderstorm right now. If for whatever reason we lose power, for whatever reason, I'll try to get back on as soon as I possibly can, but please continue and I will get on as soon as we get some electricity. But so far, so good, but thunderstorms are unpredictable in New Mexico.
Thanks for the heads up, Mr. Chairman. All we have is a steady cold rain up here. No thunder. Ms. Novoa, let us know when we're back on the record.
Yes, sir. If everybody's ready, we're back on the record. The time is 2:16 p.m. Central Standard Time.
All right, Mr. Weyermeyer, let's see. I guess let's make sure we have a witness. He's not on my screen yet, but oh, there he is. Hello, Mr. McGuire. I'll just remind you, you're under oath still. Mr.
Understood.
Weyermeyer, hopefully you got your technical issues straightened out.
We did not, but we'll just go without it, unfortunately.
All right, take it away.
Mr. McGuire, just with this remote setting, you don't have any notes with you or any extra screens open, anything of that nature. Was just noticing how you were glancing at some stuff, like right now. Do you have any notes open?
I had notes for my presentation.
Handwritten?
No.
Where were they?
They're on the screen.
Was it the same exact thing, or you had different notes?
I guess I don't understand.
The notes you're referring to, is that the exact slide deck that Mr. Rankin showed, or do you have an additional set of notes?
No, I have some additional comments.
And so for all of the testimony we've just heard, you've been using a different set of commented notes that are not here in this tribunal.
Sure, if you want them, you can have them.
We would move that all of the testimony of Mr. McGuire be stricken for his use of improper materials that are outside of any kind of properly administered sworn proceeding.
Mr. Rankin?
Oh, Mr. Hearing Officer, I don't have Mr. McGuire's notes. I think he had maybe Mr. McGuire can explain what he has, and he's said he's willing to share them. I think he was, so I don't see there any problem with what it's Mr. McGuire's testimony is what his testimony is. I don't think there's anything that's undue or improper about that.
Mr. McGuire, in responding to Mr. Waymeyer's questions over the past 57 minutes of cross-examination, were you responding from your own memory and knowledge, or were you responding from independent notes that you have there?
For the cross, no, it's all been from memory. It was just for the presentation.
Okay. Do the notes that you have with you there today differ in any material respect from the slides or the written testimony that you've submitted?
No.
All right. Okay, Mr. Waymeyer, your objection is overruled. Mr. McGuire, I would ask that from here on out you keep your testimony confined to what's in your brain and or what's already of record in this case, and not any extraneous or additional notes that you might have, okay?
Understood.
Mr. Waymeyer.
Mr. Hearing Officer, in the alternative, in light of the objection being overruled, we would ask for a complete copy of all of the notes, unadulterated in the precise form that they are, whether the particular section was looked at or not. Again, this is not how sworn testimony is to go. This is not what he can create note-wise from folks in the office or from Mr. Rankin. This is to be based on the sworn statements that have been received properly in evidence and from what's in his head as a purported expert. And so as an alternative ask, it would be the entire note deck provided over to us.
Mr. McGuire, what are you looking at?
Right now I'm looking at my screen with everybody on it, the platform.
But I mean, do you have a screen? We're at a disadvantage, I guess, if you have a screen of notes that are different from what is already in the record or the slides. Do you have a set of notes that you're referring to that are not in the record and not part of the slide presentation?
No, the notes that I referred to during my presentation were just to keep my thoughts organized in case I got lost, so I could redirect myself during that presentation. But no, for the cross, there have been no notes.
How many pages of notes are we talking about?
It was just some bullet points per slide. It's not in. It was in OneNote, so there's not really pages associated with it.
All right, Mr. Rankin, I think that's a fair request by Mr. Waymire. Do you have any problem with that?
No problem with it whatsoever.
All right. Then, Mr. McGuire, when you're done testifying, you'll please provide a copy of your bullet points and or notes to Mr. Rankin so that he can provide them to Mr. Waymire.
Understood.
Officer, I do have a
Miss-
question for you. Mr. Waymire.
I'm sorry, hearing officer.
No, I'm the chair, so I apologize. I'm just jumping in quickly. Sorry, I'm gonna put my headset on. Mr. Hearing Officer, do we need to give them, do you want to do this after his testimony or do you want to do it before?
Mr. Rosatos, I've asked the witness just to limit his testimony to what's been presented on direct examination and not to refer to his notes for, separate notes for future answers. So as long as he abides by that directive, I don't think we need to interrupt the proceeding.
Okay, I was just
In other
asking
words,
just to make sure.
there's no, as long as we eliminate the potential for unfair surprise that Mr. Waymire has raised, I don't think we have any infection going on.
Okay, I was just making sure procedurally. Thank you for answering. And Mr. Waymire, I apologize for interrupting.
I think I interrupted. I just with the remote setting, I'm doing a even worse than usual job at making sure folks are finished.
No worries, no worries. Please proceed. My apologies.
Mr. McGuire, the notes that apparently you were using in your sworn testimony to the OCC earlier today, when were those created?
Late last week when I was preparing the slideshow.
Were those notes developed in consultation with your lawyer?
We did some run-throughs of the presentation, and I made sure that the notes reflected what I wanted to say during the presentation.
The question is, the notes that you were using to testify in response to Mr. Rankin's questions, were those developed in consultation with meetings with him in those conversations? Yes or no?
A little bit of both.
If the goal here is to offer truthful testimony to the commission based on your actual qualifications and the work that you've done, the data you relied on, the methods employed, and drawing a nexus to conclusion, why did you need to script the answers with Mr. Rankin ahead of time?
Didn't script the answers. Just they were short bullet points that were directly out of my testimony.
Speaking directly out of testimony and Mr. Rankin's help, and I've never had to instruct a witness this before. If there's has anybody texted you or used some kind of a live chat feature or anything while your testimony is going on?
No, sir.
Okay. Anybody in the room with you?
No, sir.
All right. I would ask that if anybody enters the room, you immediately let everybody know. And I would ask that if anybody's texting you or sending you any kind of a live communication during this proceeding, that you let us know. Okay?
Sure. That has not occurred and it will not occur.
You remember earlier, I asked you whether your witness statements were replete with legal citations, and you said, I don't know, can you show me? You understand today's exercise is not what can Mr. Waymire show you. This is what you, on your knowledge, know as a person who's purporting to be an expert here.
But I didn't know what you were referring to, so I was asking you to show me what you were referring to.
Okay, you understand though, today's exercise is not what can I make Mr. Waymire show me? The exercise is if you have the fact or opinion in your head, you offer that truthfully. Do you understand that?
I guess so. Yeah, I've written a lot of testimony here, and I can't remember every single word that's in there.
My question is about the testimony that Mr. Rankin wrote for you. For example, production and paying quantity, you literally swore under penalty of perjury to this OCC, who you've never given testimony to before, that Empire provided no evidence or technical information showing that the San Andres is capable of producing oil or gas in paying quantities. You swore to that, right?
I did.
And I asked you 15 minutes of examination ago, do you have the first clue how to conduct a PPQ analysis? And you said, no, I don't. Do you remember that testimony?
Well, yeah, if there's no producible hydrocarbons in the zone, then of course you can't show oil in producing or in paying quantities.
My question was, do you remember 15 minutes of testimony ago swearing that you have no clue how to perform a production and paying quantities analysis?
Don't need to here.
Now, the legal citation, as examples, this is just one paragraph, and I think you've offered over 110 pages of sworn testimony. This is just one paragraph, and there's two different legal citations. You are not, I didn't hear lawyer on your CV or in any of your testimony. You're not a lawyer, are you?
I'm not.
What is section 70-2-33H?
I'm assuming it has something to do with paying quantities.
Okay, explain it for me.
I don't know the exact wording of that.
Then why would you swear to this? Do you understand how significant the oath is that you took before being allowed to utter one word in this proceeding, be it written or oral?
Objection, argumentative.
Hold on. Oh, my mic is on. It is argumentative. If you want him, there's been a lot of back and forth about whether or not this witness should be offering legal opinions or making citations, agreeing or not agreeing with constitutional provisions. It's only fair to the witness, Mr. Waymire, if you want to go there, show him the section.
Mr. McGuire, I didn't raise this section to you. You raised, let me strike that. You were the first person that mentioned section 70-2-33H in your testimony. What particular resource do you use to find your legal citations to statutes and regulations? Is it Westlaw? Is it Lexis? Is it Bloomberg? Who's your subscription service?
I don't have a subscription service to any legal, anything legal, I guess.
If the commission goes back and reads your sworn testimony and sees legal citations, is it fair for them to assume that you did not find those, you don't know what they say or mean, and that those were fed to you by counsel?
Objection, argumentative.
Overruled.
In discussions with counsel, yes, he gave me the overview of what those mean. And when I wrote this, I had an understanding of what they were and then included them in my testimony.
And move on to one of your other slides. So that I understand, what on earth is this slide supposed to demonstrate?
It's to show the cumulative New Mexico oil production that our company has supported. Oil sales, sorry.
And this would be an instance, we had quite a bit of wrestling with Mr. Macbeth about using historical performance to predict future conduct. This would be an instance in which you're predicting future based on what's happened historically, isn't it?
In what context?
I assume in the
Which
context
one of
of
these variables are you talking about?
the graph, oil production revenue.
Okay, can you restate the question again?
You are using historical oil production to predict future oil production revenue, aren't you?
Yeah, we're taking our 2025 projected disposal volumes, assuming that stays flat and doesn't add any new disposal onto the system, and projecting that forward.
I want to make sure the commission has this from you. Before preparing this slide, did you look at the historical water production volumes out of the Delaware?
Yes, yeah, I used the overall average of the water to oil ratio over the all the unconventional wells in the Delaware. I guess I should say all the unconventional wells. It was just Wolfcamp and Bone Springs in New Mexico, and calculated what the large scale average oil to water ratio was.
Great. So before I get to my next slide, the commission can take solace that before you brought this slide to them, you had made sure that you were aware of the historical volumes of Delaware saltwater water being produced. True?
Yeah.
So in Veris, I still call it drilling info. I have a drilling info account. Do you have a drilling info account that's now in Veris?
Yeah, and I still call it drilling info as well.
Okay, you use Inveris. I'm not showing you something that's unfamiliar to you.
That's correct.
You know that there's an entire dashboard for Delaware, New Mexico oil production and water production, isn't there?
I don't use this new version. I use the original DI still. I really don't like how this version is set up. So no, I did not use this.
Okay, if you'll listen to my question and answer only my question, Mr. Rankin's going to get a chance to redirect. If you'll just answer my question, this is going to go so much faster and we're going to get through this. The question is, are you aware that on Inveris, you can sort off of a dashboard and see Delaware oil production in New Mexico and Delaware water production in New Mexico? Yes or no?
Sure, I can agree with that.
In the bottom left, do you see that there's a legend there? You can even do it by operator, can't you?
You can, yes.
Barrels of Delaware oil produced. Does that trend line on the graph look anything like what you offered to this commission in your sworn testimony?
I didn't offer any graphs or anything like that.
Okay, but doesn't this look like the Delaware oil production trend since January of 2023 is falling off of a cliff in New Mexico?
I don't see any titles on this. I see it says barrels of oil equivalent per day. I didn't use equivalent. I used barrels of oil.
That's a meaningful distinction for this. You think if we just use barrels of oil, the graph is going to go the other way? Instead of falling off the cliff, it's going to go up?
No, I didn't say that.
Great. In terms of a production profile for a Delaware well, this is a fair production profile, isn't it? And this is even sorted by operator.
Sure. Yeah, I'm assuming that's like a type curve by operator.
Not even a type curve. It's an average of the production volumes that are reported to the OCD.
Okay, so
you understand?
I do, yes.
That not a type curve actuals. Now, you can even, before you came and gave the commission your earlier slide, you can sort by all of the Delaware water produced. And you understand this is not even accounting for many of these volumes being recycled. This is just salt water that comes up out of the ground. Do you understand that?
Sure, yeah.
Like Delaware oil, Delaware saltwater has also fallen off of a cliff since January of 23, hasn't it?
It appears so in this graph.
I'm worried that you're trying to leave the impression with the commission that if these 4 wells inside the EMSU are shut in as they should be, that the poor operators of New Mexico are going to have nowhere to go with their water. You're not offering that opinion to this commission, are you?
I guess I lost you. Can you restate that?
Are you putting your hand up and swearing to this commission that if waste is avoided with the Goodnight saltwater injection wells shut down, you with me so far on the hypothetical?
Yes, sir.
You're not telling this commission that there's going to be operators who have nowhere to go with their oil, are you?
With their oil?
That they're going to have to shut in their oil because they have no water disposal capacity? I would really hope that's not what you're opining to this commission.
Well, we have contracts with these operators where they have dedicated the water to us. And so they're obligated by that contract to send the water that's on that acreage that's under contract to us.
You're not listening to my question. And you're a Dallas-based case. When I said it originally, way back at early stages of the case with Mr. Macbeth, I have it exactly right. Every dollar of revenue here, that's shipped back to Dallas, Texas, and then is shared with equity partners out of Fort Worth, Texas. Do I have that right in terms of y'all's structure?
You have it right that we are a Dallas-based company, yes, and that the financial supporters are a Dallas-based company.
Now,
Firm, yes.
Now coming back to the idea that if this commission shuts down the SWD wells, that an operator would have to shut in an oil well for lack of saltwater capacity. Now, I'm not talking about how much profit Goodnight wants to make. The idea that oil wells would have to be shut in because of lack of capacity. You with me so far?
I am.
You're not going to testify to this commission under oath and swear that if these saltwater wells are shut in, that the operators would have to shut in oil wells, are you?
I think that there's the potential that might happen.
Well, let's talk about market share. Have you ever performed any analysis of what the greatest market share was Goodnight ever had in the state of New Mexico?
I've seen it, but those numbers are not at the top of my head right now.
So to just illustrate, as of January of 2023, and you agreed, there's been a trend towards using recycled water, right? As taking produced water, making it recycled, as opposed to sicking it down a hole forever, right?
That is definitely part of our business. Yes.
At the highest it ever got in New Mexico was 130 million barrels a month. True?
If you're referring to this graph, that's what this graph would indicate. Yes.
Do you think the graph, which draws its data from the OCD database, is wrong?
I have no reason to think it is wrong.
And so as we talk about the largest market share, you tell me if I get off here, but in terms of the SWDs in the EMSU, the max rate I saw was an average of 1.8 million barrels per month in the year 2024. Does that sound correct to you?
I know it in barrels per day. I'd have to do the math to see if I agree with that.
What's your barrels per day?
Long-term average for the 4 inside the unit is roughly 15,000 barrels of water per day.
Times 4 wells, times 30 days, 1.8 million. Did I hit it like literally I wasn't even off by 1 barrel, was I?
It sounds like you did pretty good.
So 1.8 million barrels per month, as we talk about inside the EMSU, would be less than 1.3% of all of the water, Delaware water in the entire state of New Mexico, right?
I could agree with that.
And if we take the SWD wells in the 2 Mile Halo, that would go to approximately 4 million barrels a month. If we put all of the inside EMSU wells plus the ones in the 2 Mile Halo, the biggest volume you ever got to there was approximately 4 million barrels a month. Does that sound correct?
Let's see. I don't like doing public math, but let's see. Capacity of the entire system is plus or minus 250,000 barrels of water per day. So it sounds like it would be quite bigger than that, actually.
What I'm talking is actuals. What Goodnight actually did in a given month was never more than 4 million barrels in a month if we take the 2 mile halo. If you'd like to disagree with it and say you don't know about your own SWDs, that's fine. I'll move on.
I haven't looked at the at that in a while. I just know what our system capacity is, and at times we're full. At other times, our operators are on reuse, or we are actively recycling water, and water's not going downhole.
So if you accept my 4 million barrel calculation per month, that would be approximately 3% of all of the Delaware water in New Mexico. Fair?
Sure. Yeah. I guess are you including conventional, or are you being specific to unconventional?
All Delaware produced water. Delaware produced water.
I just want to make that clarification. Okay.
And so to just illustrate this idea, the greatest it ever got to was 4 million barrels a month. In 2023, New Mexico's saltwater disposal operators were handling at least 130 million barrels. We're currently at about 60 million barrels per the graph, less than half. This comes back to my first question that started the whole discussion. I would hope that where in 2023, New Mexico is taking care of 130 million barrels and oil production and water production is falling off the cliff, literally less than half, 60 million plus barrels of difference, that you're not going to tell these commissioners that if these wells are shut in, oil wells will have to be shut in. There is disposal capacity in the state of New Mexico, isn't there?
Hearing officer, I object to relevance. I'm not sure what Mr. Waymeyer hopes is relevant to the commission's decision here.
Overruled.
Yeah. So, a lot of that water is going over the state line to Texas. Huge volumes of water are going over the state line to Texas, and that could be ceased at any time. Going back to the contracts, I think that some of that water would have, or some of that oil would need to be shut in until the contract issues were resolved.
You're not listening to my question. In terms of capacity, I would really hope you're not going to tell this commission that if the SWD wells are shut in within the 2 mile halo, that there's not sufficient capacity in the state of New Mexico to handle that water. Are you? Yes or no?
Well, it depends on the infrastructure in the field. But no, I disagree with you.
I think I'm hearing you say that salt water going to the state of Texas is a bad thing for New Mexico. Do you have, how is it not a great thing that the salt water is getting the heck out of the state of New Mexico? And this is a hazardous waste, right? OCD defines salt water when it leaves the lease boundary as a hazardous waste.
Objection, mischaracterizing the law, and it's just completely not true.
Well, it is testimony, Mr. Waymeyer, if you want to try and rephrase, but the objection's sustained.
Mr. McGuire, do you know in the state of New Mexico, is saltwater, produced saltwater classified as a hazardous waste depending on its location?
Objection is asking for a legal conclusion.
Overruled.
That's my understanding.
Why on earth would New Mexico want to add saltwater disposal capacity for the reason that the volumes are going to Texas right now? How is that in the interest of the state of New Mexico?
There's a few different reasons. We pay royalty owners. We pay state tax. New Mexico state land is a royalty, or as a landowner that we pay royalty to. So I think that benefits the state.
How big is the surface use agreement halo that you have a lease on for saltwater injection?
Objection, relevance. Surface use agreements and private interests have no jurisdiction within the OCC's purview.
What's the relevance, Mr. Waymeyer?
They have already far exceeded as a trespass matter the boundaries of what they claim they have the legal right to inject on by way of SUA. That long ago they've exceeded these boundaries and they're just naked trespassers. What he's advocating is that this is a wonderful thing for the state of New Mexico, that Goodnight pays taxes associated with some of its trespasses.
Mr. Hearing Officer.
I'm going to sustain the objection. if you'll move on, Mr. Waymeyer. This is the first I'm hearing testimony about trespass from a lawyer, not a witness. So objection sustained.
With respect to the trend towards recycling, there are numerous saltwater disposal operators in the state of New Mexico that are investing vast sums in CapEx to the ends of recycling water as opposed to sticking it down SWDs. True?
Yeah, that's true.
Which would further reduce saltwater disposal demand in the state of New Mexico. True?
Not necessarily. Recycling usually just delays the time it takes for a barrel to find a home at a saltwater disposal well.
Now, earlier, do you remember in your opening testimony, you made some corrections to some dates on this slide?
Yes.
Would you, with respect to the Verlander, would you believe that well's within 2 miles of the EMSU, isn't it?
It is.
If the idea from your slide, again, this was your slide, this financial implication, if you have to move a well, you chose that and you swore to it, didn't you?
Chose what?
You chose to offer this testimony. You thought it was relevant enough. You made it your very first slide, or second slide, the financial impact according to you, right?
I did.
Isn't the truth that Goodnight doesn't care one lick and in fact drilled an entire Verlander well without telling the OCC as part of these proceedings in January and February of 2025?
We did drill that well.
Why?
About that time frame, yes.
So this is after we are in this proceeding over wells that are currently injecting and that are within the 2 mile halo, right?
Yes, Verlander is within 2 miles of the unit.
You knew that there's a pending objection to the Verlander permit that Empire intends to have heard and disposed of as a matter of its due process rights.
Yeah, I guess that's accurate.
It's very easy to secure extensions on drilling deadlines from Mr. Getz at the OCD's office because you've done it numerous times, including on the Verlander well. Isn't that true?
Easy, I would not necessarily agree with. The OCD doesn't always like to grant those extensions, and that permit was going to expire, so we decided to drill the well.
Did you try to get an extension? Did you just ask Mr. Getz, can we have an extension in light of this OCC proceeding?
I think we had already had 2 extensions, and we had never seen a well that had more than 2 extensions.
Listen to my question. Question is, did you ask Mr. Getz, in light of this OCC testimony that has now gone on for over 4 entire weeks, with this permit being protested, can we have an extension so that we can see what the 3 commissioners say about this? Yes or no?
I guess I don't recall.
But why, after we are now over 4 entire weeks into this proceeding, did you not tell the OCC that in January and February of 2025, you drilled and completed the Verlander?
Mr. Hearing Officer, the Verlander is not part of this case. It's outside of the caption. And so I don't see the relevance of these questions. I allowed it to go forward a little bit here, but it's outside the scope of what's before the commission in this hearing.
I'll allow it. Overruled.
Can you please
Why?
restate the question?
Why, as we're here on a fact-finding mission, and you're telling the commission about, oh gosh, this is going to be so bad if we have to move our wells, it might be $40 million, to literally 4 times the cost of an AFE to move these. Why would you not tell them that in the middle of this proceeding, you went ahead and drilled the Verlander within 2 miles?
Why we didn't tell the commission that?
Anybody? Did you tell Empire? Did you tell the OCC?
Well, as Mr. Rankin stated, Verlander's not in this proceeding. I don't think we have to tell Empire that we're going to drill a well if we already have it permitted.
That's the business ethics of Goodnight. That's your position.
Guess I don't know. Restate the question again. Sorry, I think I
The
missed that.
business, the business ethics of Goodnight is that if you don't absolutely have to, or unless somebody forces to, you're not going to do it as a matter of just being forthcoming. True.
I mean, I'm sure they saw the rig standing up out there.
Because it's that darn close, isn't it?
Or it's-
Well, to Mr. Rankin's question on it's not part of the proceeding, do you see all these subpoenas that we've sent in September and June of 24 and December of 24? Requesting things like for anything within 2 miles of the unit, just so that we can bring this commission the science case to help them make a decision. For example, request 24, produce all well logs for wells operated by Goodnight within 2 miles. All side or rotary core information for wells within 2 miles.
Mr. Hearing Officer, objection. These were dealt with in discovery. We objected to requests for discovery outside of the narrow confines of this hearing, which were related only to the EMSU. Empire Council did not pursue or raise any objections to our objections or seek to compel. So these lines of questions is not relevant and outside the scope should not be permitted.
Mr. Waymeyer, I think you carried this line of questioning to its logical conclusion already. I think we're getting too far afield here. I'm going to sustain the objection and ask you to move on.
With respect, Mr. McGuire, to the idea that Mr. Getz wouldn't be forthcoming with an extension, on January 29th, 2025, didn't he actually email you and Mr. Rankin and others with cautionary remarks? He actually thought that what you were doing was significant because this well falls within the scope of the ongoing OCC cases between Empire of New Mexico and Goodnight.
It's the first time I'm seeing this this email.
Okay. You weren't aware that Mr. Getz had actually cautioned you about the importance on these wells?
No, I was not aware of this email that you're showing on the screen here.
Do you see the date of I just want to nail this down. As of 1/30/2025, this well was clearly completed, wasn't it?
It was.
Have you filed it? We have looked for all of the logs that are required. Have you filed all of these logs with the OCD for the Verlander well?
I believe we have.
Where is the resistivity log?
What do you mean? Where is it?
Yeah, it's not reflected as filed with the OCD, is it? Where's your resistivity log, and did you file it with the OCD?
I believe we did. Yeah.
Are you guessing?
Yeah, I guess I'd have to go back through my documents, but I'm pretty sure we submitted all logs.
Do you know when those logs were due?
After the well was drilled. I don't know the exact due date. No.
Have you filed your mud logs back?
Trying to think if we ran mud logs. Can't remember right now. But if we did have mud logs, then they would have been submitted with all the other logs.
As you mentioned, well, I was just trying to be helpful to Dr. Ampoma. Have you filed back any measured static bottom hole pressures in the Verlander well that you just took as of January 30th, 2025? Because we can't, we've looked everywhere. We just can't find any bottom hole pressures filed with the OCD. Did you file those?
I guess I don't recall right now.
And just with respect to how easy extensions are, this is an example. All it took was a letter from Mr. Aleman to get these extensions. And seeing Mr. Getz's concern in the email that I showed you earlier, don't you think Mr. Getz would have been so happy to give you an extension to avoid adding to the problems that this OCC is having to resolve?
I can't speak for Mr. Getz.
Doesn't that seem imprudent when there's literally pending cases over the Verlander permit, that you go out without telling this OCC or Empire and drill the Verlander?
Mr. Hearing Officer asked and answered. This question's been asked several times in different forums.
Sustained.
With respect to the perfs in the Verlander, and again, this is within 2 miles of EMSU, those are as shallow as 4,300, yes?
I'd have to review the documents. What do you have here on the screen?
4,300.
Can you scroll up just a little bit so I can see this whole document, please? So this is a sundry notice. That seems a little shallow to me.
It certainly feels that way for Empire too. With respect to what you're sticking in those perfs, you're actually telling the OCD you're going to stick acid into them, aren't you?
Yeah, almost every well that's drilled has acid in them as a way to clean up the perforations. Yes.
What does acid do to rock?
It can dissolve it.
I'm sorry?
It can dissolve the rock
What
very
does
near
it
the
do?
wellbore.
What does it do to anhydride?
It's a chemistry question. I don't know if it's reactive with anhydrite or not.
What does it do to cement?
It can dissolve cement. That's the goal. You want to clean up the cement that's around your perf hole.
So if there's any cement anywhere near the acid injection, you would agree that cement acid would break that down, right?
Yeah, very, very near the perforations. It's not going to affect the integrity of the well. If that were true, every well in the Permian Basin would have issues.
Dr. Ampoma had some questions about to Mr. Macbeth about his opening witness statement where he spends pages and pages on wellbore integrity. Do you remember those questions that Dr. Ampoma had for Mr. Macbeth?
Not off the top of my head.
Why is it important that you get the cement back up to either the casing or the surface with these saltwater disposal wells?
To make sure that you have integrity and that you're not going to have fluid go out of zone on the backside.
Based on this bond log for the Verlander, which is approximately 1 mile from the EMSU in the San Andres, you can see that this was not a satisfactory cement job and that it didn't seat up to the pipe, did it?
Mr. Hearing Officer, I appreciate Mr. Waymar's questions around this. However, the commission and the hearing officer did limit the scope of this hearing to wells that are within the EMSU. And this is outside that limit of the instruction from the commission on what the scope of this hearing would address. This is a case involving the Verlander that Mr. Waymar and Empire are free to bring up when the other cases come before the commission.
May I respond briefly?
Well, tell me, where are you going with this, Mr. Waymire? Is this to show that acid eats rock?
No, Mr. Hearing Officer. This is to show that Goodnight, who wants to assure this commission and Empire, just take our words for it. We're a great option, despite all the things that have happened in Oregon and Texas and New Mexico and everywhere else. Here, we are within 1 mile. And they are not properly cementing their SWD wells in the San Andres, at the top of the San Andres, where their own witnesses have testified there's a ROS. This is not acceptable for Empire to be put in a situation where a party such as Goodnight behaves this way.
All right, well, it's character evidence. I'm going to sustain the objection.
Mr. McGuire, do you see where the cement is needed per the OCD regulations, how high it needed to come up to the casing string?
Can you point that out to me? There's a lot of words here.
Permittee shall circulate to surface this cement for the surface and intermediate casings. Actually, I'm going to pause there. Do you know what the cementing protocols are for saltwater injection wells in New Mexico?
And yeah, I believe it says cement to surface.
Do you know how to read a cement bond log?
Vaguely, that's not my expertise.
Is the answer you don't know how?
I've looked at a few and have some ideas.
I thought you were the downhole guy. You said, I don't know anything about horizontal pipe, but if it's downhole pipe, I'm the engineer and I know about it.
This is the drilling engineer's preview.
Do you have enough understanding to know what that hot yellow fluorescence on the right track means? That what you need, if we're following OCD regulations, would be a cement bond log that looks like this dark section down here, as
Sure.
opposed to the hot yellow.
Yes, I understand that.
What is got it? If the OCC or Empire had been alerted to the drilling of this well, maybe something could have been done. But what is Empire going to strike this? What is Goodnight going to do about this?
Mr. Hearing Officer, again, this is about the Verlander well, which is outside of the EMSU. If Mr. Waymire wants to address the conditions of the CBL, the cement behind the wells in the unit, which is part of this case, I think that's appropriate. This is far outside the scope of what this case is about and what is being asked of the commission in this matter.
May I respond very briefly?
You can respond briefly, yeah, but I do think that it'll have to be persuasive because I think you're getting pretty far afield here.
This is within 1 mile. This is where the water is going to communicate. Nobody with Goodnight produced these documents or told Empire this was going on within 1 mile of its boundary while it's being litigated, while there's a request for productions that's covering it. If Goodnight's going to pretend to be some kind of an honorable operator of saltwater disposal wells and is doing this stuff in the middle of this OCC proceeding, these commissioners absolutely have to know about it, because Mr. McGuire is responsible for all downhole pipe, he says, and this is the stuff that's going on right here. While the OCC is determining, is a waste of Empire's hydrocarbons going to occur because of these people?
Mr. Hearing Officer, they had a valid permit. We agreed with council that publicly filed records and documents with the OCD were not part of discovery because they could get them publicly, as they've done. Again, this is outside the scope of this hearing. This hearing is limited to the wells within the unit boundary. The commission has made that determination months ago.
Yeah, I'm going to sustain the objection sustained. If you'll move on, Mr. Waymire.
Let's talk about tops. You've already testified under oath, Mr. McGuire, that you didn't pick the tops in the EMSU. That was done by Mr. Drake. True?
Objection, mischaracterization of prior testimony.
You did not pick the tops. I'm sorry, Mr. Harwood.
Thank you. Again, Mr. Rankin, you're going to have to do better than that. You'll have to refresh my recollection on why, if you're going to raise objections that it mischaracterizes prior testimony, I need more information. I'm going to overrule that. But if Mr. Waymire, why don't you try and rephrase?
Mr. McGuire, you've already testified that in the EMSU, you did not pick the tops of the San Andreas, did you? That was done by Mr. Drake.
That's that's true for the vast majority of them. Yes.
And likewise, we've now heard from every single one of the experts that you all have, haven't we?
Yeah, I'm the last expert.
Now, you remember in opening remarks, Mr. Rankin said, I just can't wait for, he told the OCC, told the commission, I just can't wait for you to hear all of my experts. You remember those remarks?
I believe so, yeah.
So if they just want to, if we want to have an examination of the person for Goodnight that picked tops, we've now heard from Dr. Davidson. He didn't pick any tops, did he?
He did not.
We heard from Mr. Knights. He didn't pick any tops, did he?
He did not.
We heard from Mr. Macbeth. He didn't pick any tops, did he?
He did not.
We heard from Mr. White. He didn't pick any tops.
Not inside the EMSU.
I really hope Mr. Alamon didn't pick any tops.
He did not.
So everybody said, we got the tops from Mr. McGuire. You remember, witness after witness, we've asked geologists, y'all brought in expert geologists who don't pick tops. We've examined everyone. Everyone said, we just got them from Mr. McGuire. That's a fair characterization?
Yeah, that's a fair characterization.
And so if the commission wanted to examine, or as part of its due process rights, Empire wanted to examine Mr. Drake on the top selection and methodology, we can't do that because he's not a witness. Isn't that right?
Yes, Mr. Drake is retired. That's correct.
Help me with paragraph 94. When you swore Goodnight Midstream defines the boundary between the Grayburg and the San Andreas as the location of the mappable boundary permeability barrier that prevents flow from occurring between those two formations. Quote, this is a functional top of San Andreas. Where on earth in geology, literature, studies, textbook, anywhere there is a quote, functional top?
Yeah, so in areas where the chronostratigraphy is difficult to pick in well logs, for our industrial purposes, we wanted to pick the boundary that separated these two reservoirs. And we got guidance from the OCD because of that issue, and they agreed with our methodology.
Okay, did you talk to the OCD? I just want to know if you have personal knowledge you can swear to of conversations with the OCD about tops. Did you do that?
I have personal knowledge of it, yes.
You had the conversation?
I did not have the conversation,
Okay,
but
that's
I have
not
personal knowledge of the conversation.
That is not personal knowledge. That would on its best day be hearsay, okay? If someone wanted to come and tell the commissioners about a conversation with the OCD, the person that had the conversation needs to be here. And that wasn't you. Do I have that right?
Yes, I did not have a conversation with the OCD with discussing the tops, but I discussed with the people that did. We had a debrief meeting, and I got the download of what was discussed.
Likewise, the idea that XTO thought it was pretty cool to have SWDs permitted inside the EMSU oil unit. You with me so far?
I am.
You had no conversations with XTO, did you? Zero.
What time frame?
Ever on the EMSU. This was all while Mr. Drake was there before you came in. You had zero conversation with XTO on EMSU. True?
I've had conversations with XTO on this project before.
When?
In the last year or two, or maybe 2 years ago.
They'd already sold.
Okay.
They had already sold to Empire.
You asked about if I had conversations, and I have.
Now, the original conversation with XTO, that would have been at the time that the permit was to the Devonian outside of the oil unit, wouldn't it? You need me to break it down?
No, I got you. I'm just trying to remember. I'm trying to remember the timing of those conversations. No, I'm pretty sure those conversations occurred because we were planning on recompleting the Rhino SWD.
You have no clue, do you?
It's not what I said.
Wouldn't it make sense that the conversation would have been as part of the first permit because XTO was an operator to be noticed and that at that time it was the Devonian? Doesn't that just make common sense?
Makes just as much common sense that we would have the conversation when we were planning on plugging it back, because we have to re-permit, and they would be notified again of that permit.
In fact, they weren't. Corporate headquarters used to be in Fort Worth, Texas. Now they've moved to Spring, Texas with Exxon. I have an office down the street from the address y'all sent Midland notice to. Have you ever been to, the first notice to XTO was provided by certified mail, return receipt requested, and was directed to a different address, wasn't it?
A different address than.
Strike that. Apologize for interrupting.
Mr. McGuire, let's take it in pieces. The
Okay.
first notice, when you were going to the Devonian, that notice was given to XTO, certified mail return receipt requested. Right?
I believe so.
When you came up out of the Devonian into the oil unit, that was sent to a different address, someplace in Midland, Texas, with no return receipt requested. Isn't that right?
Mr. Hearing Officer, these questions actually were related to Mr. Alleman's testimony because he's the one that sent those, his company, and he was responsible for sending those out. So these questions should have been directed to Mr. Alleman, not Mr. McGuire. It's outside the scope of his direct testimony.
I'm going to allow it. He can just say no, or I don't know. So overruled.
So let me make sure I got the question right. After we were going to recomplete the Rhino to a San Andreas well, it was sent to a different address than the original Devonian application was. Do I have that right?
You've got it dead on.
Okay. My understanding is that the permit consultants got the addresses from the OCD website.
You have no idea why they would have sent it to Midland, do you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that would be a question for Mr. Allman.
Why didn't they do it certified mail return receipt requested? Like when you told XTO and they signed saying they received it at the proper address in the Devonian.
That's a conversation. I wasn't involved in that. That's not a question for me.
As we talk about top picks, you want the commission to believe that this is a basis for a geologist picking a top. Would have been as part of the initial unitization papers. And you chose this slide, you highlighted it, Mr. Rankin, that they cite an approximate depth of 4,100 to 4,500 feet.
That's what the document says.
Is that geology? That doesn't really seem like a geological way to pick a top.
Well, because the chronostratigraphy is very difficult here, we wanted to see what the operators who were drilling wells and had experience in this area at the time, what they were doing.
Have you ever mapped the Levington sand?
No, I have not.
So we've heard Dr. Lindsay talk about the Levington sand. We've seen literature from New Mexico, the university on Levington sand. We've seen it described in other literature, and it's got a clear, clean gamma ray response. It never occurred to you as a geologist to try to start by mapping the Levington sand with its clean gamma response?
I don't think that Levington sand has a clear gamma ray response across the entire field.
And again, as we just talk about geology, this little cartoon, you cite this, right? I mean, this is what you're citing for your basis of your San Andreas pick?
Yeah, that was part of it, yes.
On where in geology, well, let's start. Where is this well, the cartoon? Where is the well associated with the cartoon?
Those are the water supply wells at the top of the structure.
In fact, the truth is there is no particular well associated with the cartoon. You couldn't even call this a type cartoon, could you?
Guess I would disagree. This paper discusses the drilling of the water supply wells and where the San Andreas was found in those, or where the San Andreas was found in those water supply wells.
So, moving from qualifications to data relied upon, this was 50% of what you cite for your basis of picking San Andreas where it is. And we've got a cartoon, and this cartoon doesn't even correspond to a particular well.
The cartoon was talking about the water supply wells. It says it right there on figure 6 EMSU water supply casing programs and lithology diagram.
As a geologist, wouldn't you want to know which particular well this is supposed to be representative of so that you can start making correlations?
Well, yeah, so we looked at that. We had the Chevron picks for the water supply wells, and we utilized them.
I want to ask about this one. This is also something you've sworn to. This top is confirmed to the barrier that separates two different pressure systems, one associated with Grayburg, the other associated with San Andreas Aquifer, discussed later in testimony. Because of the difficulty identifying stratigraphic intervals within the San Andreas carbonate ramp systems that exist within the EMSU, the best method for accurately picking the top of the San Andreas, and the strongest evidence it is correct, is not necessary geologic, but engineering-based data. I read your opinion correctly there?
You did?
In the entire history of published scientific literature, have you been able to find one publication in the history of time on the planet Earth in which anyone has written that the proper way, best way to pick the top of a formation is not geology, but rather engineering? Yes or no?
Yes.
What site? I didn't see it cited. Where would we find it?
Yes. Well, I guess I would point you to Mr. Bailey's testimony. He said that that's commonly used in areas where the chronostratigraphy is difficult to see in well logs.
Yeah. All right. I'm not going to fuss with you on what Mr. Bailey said. I'm glad he's not here right now, but but as we come in response to that remark, well, it wouldn't do any good. You're not here. Coming back to, I asked you published scientific literature. You with me so far? Again, if you'll just listen to the question, it's going to go so much faster. Published scientific literature by an engineer or a geologist, peer reviewed or not peer reviewed, textbook or university paper or PhD thesis or Chevron created, Exxon created. If this commission just wants to look at one scrap of published paper that would support that you pick tops using engineering as opposed to a geology pick, you don't have a single scrap of paper to direct this commission to, do you?
Our goal here was to define the point which these two different reservoir systems where that pressure differential occurs.
Is the answer to my question you don't have any scrap of paper in the entire history of science to support what you just said here?
I don't have anything off the top of my head here. I'm sure I could find something if I looked.
Now, this paper, this was published by the New Mexico Bureau of Mines and Mineral Resources, a division of the New Mexico Institute of Mining and Technology. Geology of Loco Hills Sand, Loco Hills Field, Eddy County, New Mexico. Would you agree with me that this would be a reputable source for geologic information on the San Andreas?
Specific to that field, yeah.
Useless here at the EMSU? Or do you think this is reliable information for use at EMSU?
I think it's 50 miles away. So geology could change drastically over short distances. So to apply this to EMSU, you might be able to get some information from it, but no, I don't think it would be really applicable to EMSU.
Okay, and I don't care which way the fish flops. So it's your testimony here as the alleged expert that this is not a relevant or reliable source for geological information of the San Andreas at EMSU. True?
It's not exactly what I said.
You agree or don't agree?
I agree that it could provide maybe some information that could be helpful, but it's pretty far away.
The San Andreas Formation is about 1,500 feet thick in this area. That aligns closely with Empire's thickness, doesn't it?
It does.
Cites the Lovington Sand about 150 feet below the top. That also aligns closely with the opinion testimony of Dr. Lindsay and the opinion testimony of Mr. Bailey, doesn't it?
Yeah, maybe, but the top of the San Andreas is an unconformity. So just because the Lovington Sand is 150 feet below the top, 50 miles away, doesn't mean that it's 150 feet below the top somewhere else.
But it's going to be below the top of the San Andreas. I would hope we could agree on that as a matter of geography.
Could be right at the top. Depends on how much erosion occurred at the top of the San Andreas.
If the commission wanted to hear from a geologist that studied that, the only ones that they would be able to hear from is Dr. Lindsay and Mr. Bailey, not you, right?
That studied what?
Where the Lovington sand would be within the EMSU.
Yeah, I've see where they the interval that they've called the Lovington Sand. I'm not sure it's the same correlated interval from the Loco Hills 50 miles away. I haven't done that analysis.
My question is, if this commission wants to hear from an actual educated
Objection,
geologist,
argumentative.
may I finish my question, Mr. Hearing Officer?
Yeah, let him finish his question, Mr. Rankin.
My question, Mr. McGuire, is if these commissioners want to hear from an actual educated and practicing geologist who has mapped the Lovington sand in the EMSU that's here before this commission for decision, the only ones they could visit with would be Dr. Lindsay and Mr. Bailey. Isn't that true?
I mean, they have mapped something that they call the Lovington Sand. Whether it's the same Lovington Sand that's described in the Loco Hills, I'm not sure.
And again, still working out of the New Mexico Bureau of Mines and Mineral Resources publication. Do you see at the bottom, the upper San Andreas is identified?
I see that text, yes.
And the Lovington sand sits in the middle of the upper San Andreas?
That's what it says for this generalized cross-section of the Loco Hills field.
Have you looked at the lexicon book for West Texas and Southeastern New Mexico, published by the West Texas Geological Society?
It's been a while. I have seen this, but it's been quite some time.
Would this be a relevant and reliable source of geology information for the EMSU area?
Maybe.
Did you look at it as part of any of your work in this case to form opinions?
Not this case, no.
Lovington sand member of the San Andreas Formation, original definition, near the top of the San Andreas, there is one sandy bed persistent over the entire lime bank. This is called the Lovington sand. The sand is gray to gray white, fine to medium grained, semi-friable. That means easily cracked up, right? Or do you know as a geologist what semi-friable means?
I know what semi-friable means.
What does it mean?
It means that you could basically break it. It's not well cemented, I guess, is a good way to put it.
Okay, so as a geologist, you can tell these commissioners that if your pick would be the upper San Andreas, of upper San Andreas would be one and the same as Lovington sand, that the Lovington sand would be semi-friable, that is easily cracked up. True?
I don't think that what they have defined as the Lovington sand here at EMSU is friable. I don't think it has much sand content in it. That's not what Mr. Bailey's, or I guess Mr. Burkhead's lithology diagrams show for the Lovington sand interval.
Mr. Bailey at Exhibit K7 also brought in a BEG study, which would demonstrate the location of the Lovington sand. And you can tell the commissioners, again, from this literature, the Lovington sand sits conformably within the upper San Andreas, doesn't it?
It says northwest shelf of Eddy County, New Mexico. This is a different geologic province than where EMSU sits.
My question is, this is a BEG study that places the Lovington sand within the San Andreas. Yes?
That's what it says. Yes.
And do you see that
it's not anywhere near EMSU?
Do you see that the Lovington sand here has a clear gamma ray marker?
Yeah, sure. I can see what they're calling the Lovington sand, and there is a high gamma ray interval associated with it.
By way of laying hands on a single publication in the history of time that would not place the Lovington sand within the upper San Andreas, have you been able to find any such document ever?
That would not place it in the upper San Andreas?
Yes.
I can't recall. I don't think I've ever seen anybody put it in the lower San Andreas. I guess I don't really understand where you're going with this question.
Anywhere in New Mexico where a geologist has written a paper, produced a mapping, produced work product that would indicate that there's not Lovington sand within the upper San Andreas?
Yeah, most of the stratigraphy says that it's at the upper San Andreas, or I've seen publications where they put it at the boundary between what has been defined as the upper and lower San Andreas.
But it's going to be somewhere below the top of the upper San Andreas, isn't it?
Not necessarily. Like I said, if the top of the San Andreas is an unconformity, it could be right at the top. It could not. It could be completely eroded and not have the Lovington sand.
My question is, where's the publication that says that? If we don't want to take your say so, what publication do we look to see that?
So there was a cross section by Dr. Trentham that was produced to us in Discovery, where he shows the Lovington sand right at the top of the San Andreas.
Was that published and where?
Yes, I don't know if it was published in a paper or if it was just from a talk that he gave, but it was in the documents that were produced to us in Discovery, and it was authored by Dr. Trentham.
My question is, a published paper in the history of science that would not place the Lovington sand within the upper San Andreas. Can you tell the commissioners where do we go find that publication?
I guess same answer. I really don't know what you're
Now,
trying to get at.
Now, this was a slide that you showed in your direct testimony. Do you remember trying to show the Goodnight pick against certain OCD picks?
These were Chevron picks.
Well, so do you agree with them or not?
Some of them, yes. Yeah, particularly the 458, we put it at the exact same spot.
You also have the same pick at the top of the San Andreas and the Rhino with Empire, don't you?
That might be true. Yeah, I think so.
You recognize this document, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think this is when we did a review of all of the well file picks for all the wells that are within the boundaries of the EMSU.
Who's we?
Me and my team.
I need humans.
Yeah, so Julia Caldera Bayard helped me with this work.
Did she pick tops?
No.
Okay, who else? Anybody?
I think Julia and I did most of this work. I don't think anybody else worked on that.
So what I've done is I've sorted out of your Excel spreadsheet the ones where you didn't have a pick or the OCD didn't have a pick. So basically, if there's an OCD pick and a Goodnight pick, this is what we got. Okay.
Okay, yeah, and to be clear, the OCD it's not the pick of the OCD, it's the pick of the operator in that that put the pick on the file that got submitted to the OCD. It's just referencing the OCD well file.
Yeah, and I would submit we should pick on actual geology using core and published literature and rock outcrop studies. But since you want to do it off of OCD well files, we're going through the exercise with you. So we have the OCD well file pick from whoever the operator was. And over to the left, we have the Goodnight pick. Do you see that?
I do.
And then we show the difference in feet.
Okay.
How much lower you are than what's in decades of OCD well files from the operators. Do you see that?
Yeah, I see where I'm assuming you've done that. That's a calculation. I don't think that was originally in that spreadsheet, so I'm assuming that was something that Empire did. Is that correct?
Nope, you did the differences yourself as you were trying to see how far y'all were off from I don't know, 60 or 70 different OCD files, maybe more. Those are yours.
Sure.
So, I mean, just eyeball this one after another. You can tell the commissioners that you're probably an average about 200 feet deeper than what the historical operators of the EMSU are. Isn't that true?
For this particular subset, that might be true. Yes, but I know that this document had many more wells than what's being displayed here. And they're not
So there's-
all. I mean, there's some that are shallower than ours.
So there's
Or,
41.
sorry, deeper than ours.
You're talking about two of them? I just count, this is over 50. And would you agree that that's about 200? You're off by about 200 off of all of these 50?
Yeah, that's what it looks like. Yeah. But again, if you take all of these in the aggregate, they're all over the place. I mean, there's no consistency when you look at all of the wells in the EMSU in aggregate.
Well, I can only do the ones that you gave me the picks off of, and you're consistently 200 feet off of everybody. Here's the rest of the wells.
Okay.
And again, I went through your spreadsheet. Mr. Rankin, if I've done something wrong, it's your Bates label 1979. But again, if there was a Goodnight pick and an OCD well file pick, we put it on here.
Okay.
And here's the rest of them I think you're referring to. We just had over 51 too. Oh, this is like 35 or 40 more. We're at like nearly 90 wells.
Okay.
Does that align more closely with the number of wells you think you analyzed?
I still feel like it was more than that. I mean, it took us months to dig up all of that stuff. So no, I guess I can't remember. I feel like there's more, but I guess I might be wrong.
And you can tell the commission again, just like the first 50 plus, for these 40, you're off by about 200 feet.
Yeah, it appears that way, but then when I look at the wells that actually targeted the San Andres, we're pretty close.
My question is, there's literally dozens and dozens of wells in the historical OCD files. All of them picked a top of the San Andres with the OCD that the OCD acknowledged, and you were off from the vast, vast majority of those, and not a little bit, by over 200 feet. True?
Some of those really old well files, they're actually calling the top of the Grayburg the San Andres top. There's a lot of issues with this because the chronostratigraphy is very hard to see in well logs. So yeah, it's difficult.
Well, in fact, if the idea was that, well, this data is bad, this is Grayburg, did you realize y'all had put your notes into the Excel file that was produced to us?
I guess I see that here.
Were you aware that we had these notes, or this is the first you're realizing there was a notes tab hidden behind?
The notes may have been in there. I don't think.
And again, this, y'all worked this, and I think the lady you referred to was merging. Is SAD, is that initials for Mr. Drake?
It is, yes.
Why did she have to merge Mr. Drake's picks with your picks with a preference for Mr. Drake's?
So I get that was basically the order. If there's two different source codes inside the software, and I think she's just saying because there was wells that were given to us after Mr. Drake left. So those are the picks that I added after Mr. Drake left, and so she's for those wells, she was merging just the two data sets where Mr. Drake didn't have a pick, but I had one.
Okay, but you just testified earlier that you didn't pick any tops in the San Andres. Based on this notes tab, you did pick some. They disagreed with Mr. Drake, and the lady you referred to apparently did the merging. Why have you not brought to this commission any of the work that you, the actual geologist, did?
Mr. Hearing Officer, that's a mischaracterization, mischaracterization of Mr. McGuire's testimony. He did testify that he did pick some tops. He also testified that he independently reviewed, and adopted other picks by Mr. Drake.
Mr. Waymire, I'm going to sustain that objection. I think really you're arguing with this witness. The other thing is, I think you all agreed that everybody got 2.25 hours of cross-examination with witnesses, and you're at that point with this witness. So I guess I'd ask how much more you think you have with this witness.
And I'm not trying to be quarrelsome or disagreeable, but the agreement that's stated on the record provides for banking of time not used with earlier witnesses. Empire presently has about 11 hours of bank time to use with Mr. McGuire per the agreement that's been stated on the record. And I would anticipate I have about 4 more.
Oh, okay. Well, math is my short suit. You have any disagreement with Mr. Waymeyer's math, Mr. Rankin?
No, I think my colleague's been keeping track of the time, so I don't have a disagreement. But I'm glad to hear that he's not going to do what was it, 10 hours?
11.
11, yeah. So I'm glad to hear that.
But, and again, there's been keeping of records. I think right now, Mr. West has the record, but I can assure we're not going to get anywhere close to breaking any records with Mr. McGuire out of my examination.
All right. Well, why don't we go till, let's see, let's go till 3 o'clock and then take a break. So go ahead, Mr. Waymeyer.
Very good. Just before leaving these tops, because you suggested that maybe these operators screwed up and picked up top of Glorieta, in every single one of these OCD picks in which there's a San Andres pick, you know, in that OCD well file, there's also a Grayburg pick. There was no confusion about Grayburg and San Andres. You can go to the OCD file and everyone has a San Andres and a Grayburg. Isn't that true?
That's not true, no. Particularly the oldest wells, they were picking the top of the San Andres at the top of the Grayburg interval in the really old wells.
They have a line item for a Glorieta formation top, don't they?
Well, yeah, but that not in those really old files. They did not. You just had to write them in.
For the Glorieta.
Well, for the Glorieta. Well, I said that the formation top was picked at the top of the Grayburg. If I said Glorieta, I misspoke.
I misspoke. Grayburg. Okay. If you're suggesting that what they did was they mixed up and what they were really talking about was Grayburg, but they wrote San Andres, in each one of these OCD well files, there is a Grayburg pick and there's a San Andres pick, isn't there?
No, that's not true.
XTO. Doesn't XTO, the world's largest producer of oil, if you take out the Middle East, their picks align precisely with Empire's picks, don't they?
I don't think I've reviewed every single one, but no, actually, no. I know that they don't align on every single one because they moved their tops. When you look at the new tech logs that were performed for XTO and then the reprocessed logs that were done for Empire, the tops moved.
Who moved the tops?
Somebody at Empire or New Tech? I don't know.
But between alignment with picks by XTO, you can tell these commissioners under oath that it is Empire's picks that are nearly identical to XTO's and Goodnight's that are wildly different than XTO's. Isn't that true?
Yeah, that might be true, but we weren't trying to define the chronostratigraphy. We were trying to define the two different reservoirs that act differently from one another.
As we talk about the unitized formation, you know that the unitized formation captures all of the Grayburg and all of the San Andres, don't you?
Shouldn't have included the San Andres.
What question do you think I just asked you?
I heard the question.
You just chose not to answer it?
I think the record speaks for itself, and I think that like I said, the San Andres should have never been included in the unitized formation.
You listen, you're the one under oath. The unitized oil formation is all of San Andres and all of Grayburg, isn't it?
It erroneously included the San Andres.
Is the answer to that yes?
Yeah, currently, yes, that is true. But again, erroneously included the San Andres.
And I have this beautiful smoking gun clip in terms of the timing of discovery, but because you're not here in person, we can't play this thing through the deal. I wanted to play it. But you can tell the commission that Goodnight had actual awareness that the San Andres and the Grayburg were unitized by the OCD before it permitted its first well in those depths. Isn't that true?
Yeah, that's true. And we had conversations about that with the OCD prior to filing the applications.
Now, well, so that I don't have to hear about conversation, you didn't have any of those conversations before filing the application. That was not your timing, was it? That was Mr. Drake.
I was working for the company at the time those conversations were had.
Who did you speak to at the OCD about any kind of a unitized interval before the first permit was filed? I need a name of a person you spoke to.
I didn't speak to anybody, as I've clearly stated.
So now we're
But
coming.
I've heard that, we had debrief meetings after that meeting happened, and that was what was discussed. That's what I was told was discussed.
I don't need hearsay from you. If someone's going to come and swear about a conversation, they need to be here in Santa Fe and put their hand up and take the oath. The point being, you had 0 conversations with OCD before any first well was permitted. That's true.
That is true. Yep.
Now, and so, but you do know that Goodnight had actual awareness of that unit before permitting the first well. Isn't that true?
Again, yes, and we had conversations with the regulator about it before we filed the applications.
Nowhere in the permit were the boundaries of the EMSU identified, were they? In the very first permit in the EMSU, on that permitting paperwork, were any of the boundaries of the EMSU identified, yes or no?
I don't believe so. I don't, you don't have, it's not required to put the unit boundaries on those area of review maps.
But you put the unit boundaries on other permits, didn't you?
I don't know. Did we?
Well, I'll show it to you in a little while.
Okay.
Why on the first ones did you not put any EMSU boundaries on it? Just because you weren't required to?
I don't know. If you're trying to suggest that the OCD had no awareness that we were permitting inside the unitized interval, that's incorrect.
You have no personal knowledge whatsoever about what the OCD knew or didn't know because you didn't speak to them. On your best day, you're talking about hearsay, and Goodnight's made the decision to not bring anybody here to testify who would have actual knowledge. Isn't that right?
If you're saying that my personal knowledge from those conversations is not personal knowledge, I would disagree, but I get your point.
And I assume you don't have any familiarity with Texas Rule of Evidence 602. Just as we're trying. Okay, perfect. Now we'll move on to the next one.
But are we talking about? We're not talking about Texas here.
I'm sorry. New Mexico rule of evidence is. I've been told by Miss Hardy that we're in the same sequencing here in New Mexico. Do you know if you got New Mexico Rule of Evidence 602? Share that one.
I don't.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that we weren't talking about a different state here. And
with respect to the unitization well, do you see the unitization well is right there in the center? We'll zoom in on it. And that would reflect the top of the oil unit in the Grayburg and the bottom of the oil unit in the San Andres. Yes.
Yeah, and the unitization well is Empire's SWD.
Okay. So you can tell these commissioners, you have perforations in the San Andres and you have perforations in the upper San Andres, don't you?
Define upper San Andres.
I'm not a geologist, but how about I defer to Dr. Lindsay, who's crawled around in the rocks with a hammer and has sworn to the commission and offered sworn statements. And I'll defer to Mr. Bailey, who did actual geology work in this case.
Okay, so which perforations are you talking about?
Well, for example, why don't we just take the Rhino?
Okay.
So that the commission understand, do you see, these are your perfs in the Rhino well, right?
That's correct, yep.
And we see where you all have picked your upper San Andres. Y'all are the same as us in the Rhino, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm assuming that your purple line is a modification and that the purple line is on top of my line, so sure.
Yeah, and again, the idea that if you think this is some game of what can you have Mr. Waymeyer show you, as the corporate representative of Goodnight and a educated geologist, was it really brand new information to you in your testimony today that Goodnight has perforations in the upper San Andreas in the Rhino well? You just learned this for the first time from my questioning?
No, I just want to make sure that we're on the same page and we're talking about the same thing.
My question was, before I had to go through that whole exercise and take 3 minutes on what should have been 30 seconds, you know that Goodnight has perforated intervals in the upper San Andreas, yes or no? You understood that was the first question?
I heard the question, yes, and I wanted to make sure. I mean, we clearly have a difference in what we're calling the upper San Andreas, so I want to make sure that we're talking apples to apples here.
The truthful answer is yes. You could have just said yes.
Mr.
we do
Hearing
have
Officer,
perforation.
Mr. Waymire is being very argumentative. We have explained through Mr. McGuire's direct testimony that what we're talking about, when we refer to Upper San Andreas, or what they talk about as being the Upper San Andreas, is different than what we talk about as being the San Andreas. So Mr. McGuire is well within his rights to understand exactly what it is that Mr. Waymire is asking about. So I ask that Mr. Waymire please conduct his questioning with respect to Mr. McGuire and not be so argumentative.
I would add that
Mr. Waymire, you do have a tendency to be argumentative with the witness, and Mr. McGuire, I would remind you, on the other hand, Mr. Waymire makes a good point. I want you to listen to his question and answer his question. Mr. Rankin will have an opportunity to redirect you, okay? So you don't have to cage and explain every answer. I know there's a fine line there, but try and remember that.
Understood.
And Mr. Hearing Officer, for our part, there hasn't been 5 square answers to a question in the last 2 hours. The reason that the examination has gone the direction it has is because this witness refuses to provide simple factual answers to simple factual questions. And that was a perfect example.
Well, let's move on, unless Mr. Chairman Rosatos has more to add.
This is going back and forth and back and forth, and I have stressed multiple times in this case, and I'm kind of tired of saying it over and over and over. You guys have to have some decorum in here. We're not just here to placate, and you know that these shenanigans, if it was in an actual court, a district court, would not have upheld. So I have to agree with the hearing officer. We need to keep this decorum, and I'm getting tired of having to repeat myself. So I think this will be the last time that I'm going to say it. I'm going to leave the rest of this to the hearing officer. But if this continues, we're going to have some problems, people. So please keep this decorum.
Mr. McGuire, by reference to this exhibit or demonstrative, there's no Lovington sand that you can find anywhere in relation to what you would identify as your pick, is there?
No, we did not place a top that is called the Lovington sand. No.
Don't you agree that would have been useful to the commissioners in this case, as if Goodnight had identified where, if it thinks it has a pick for the top of the San Andreas, the Lovington sand would be?
Not necessarily.
Do we agree that if the commissioners look as they go back and look at this, if the Lovington sand would be up in the Grayburg based on Goodnight's picks, we could agree that that makes no sense whatsoever. No one has ever written that there's Lovington sand in the Grayburg. Isn't that true?
Well, like I've said before, our goal was not to pick the chronostratigraphy of the San Andreas. It was to pick the point that defines these two different reservoir systems.
So you've never even tried to pick the top of San Andreas?
No, that wasn't our goal. We were trying to pick reservoirs.
So if the commission wants to go back at the end of all of this testimony, 4 weeks, and says, has Goodnight attempted to pick the San Andreas as part of its testimony to the commission? It's your testimony. You have never attempted to pick the San Andreas for purposes of the testimony in this case. True?
We've picked the point. What we're calling San Andreas is the point that separates the two reservoir systems.
Which you're saying is different than the geological top of the San Andreas. True?
Yeah, that could be true. Yeah.
When in the history of published scientific literature would somebody pick a top that's different than the actual geological top? What's the citation?
When defining reservoirs.
Where would we read that in a book?
systems.
Where would we read that in a book?
I don't have a citation off the top of my head for you, but that's done in subsurface mapping.
We're moving over to talk about communication now. This is from your sworn statement. The early field production behavior of the Grayburg is typical of a solution gas drive reservoir having a rapid decline in reservoir pressure without a rapid rise in water production. So is it your testimony here that there was a rapid decline of reservoir pressure created merely through the extraction of liquids?
Yes, that is true. Yeah, the reservoir pressure dropped pretty quickly during primary production.
Because of an extraction of liquids.
Yes, yeah.
You say the upper San Andres is capped by tight dolomite and anhydrite, which serves as the upper geologic seal to prevent migration to the formations above. Have you ever looked at the RR Bell core descriptions?
I have, yeah, and the RR Bell core description does not get down to the point that we've defined, the boundary that separates these two reservoirs.
Have you looked at the 679 core description?
I have.
Can you show the commissioners where anhydrite is described in the upper San Andres in the 679 core description?
Yeah, there's areas that have elevated anhydrite.
There's been conversation of bedded anhydrite. Will Goodnight now agree that there is zero bedded anhydrite at the top of the San Andres?
I didn't say that there was bedded anhydrite, although there are intervals where the predominant mineral is anhydrite. So while there's no layers that are 100% anhydrite, there are intervals that are predominantly anhydrite. So we could go back and forth on what you want to call a bedded anhydrite.
I would, as the commissioners assess credibility, I just like you on the record as the corporate representative and the geology expert. Is there bedded anhydrite in the upper San Andres? Yes or no?
There's, like I just said, there are intervals where the predominant mineral in that interval is anhydrite.
So you're saying yes, as they assess your credibility, your position is there is bedded anhydrite.
I wouldn't say that there's a layer that is 100% anhydrite. No.
Anhydrite happens in a shallow water environment, doesn't it?
Yes, generally, yeah.
Perfect. So it's your testimony here as Goodnight's representative and expert geologist that anhydrite occurs in shallow water environments and that there's anhydrite throughout the San Andres at EMSU. True?
Not throughout, no.
And you heard all the testimony and fussing with Mr. Davidson, Dr. Davidson and Mr. Knights about the importance of the rock facies selection here and whether this is a deep water environment or a shallow water environment. Isn't that right?
I did hear that conversation.
Now, this is a slide that you showed with Mr. Rankin earlier. The 262 and the 239, would you agree that those are high on structure? As we talk geology, are those high on structure?
They are.
If we indulged your oil water contact, there's no water underneath the Grayburg in those wells. They are above the oil water contact because of structure, and what's underneath the Grayburg is San Andres rock. Isn't that true?
You lost me there. The 239 was drilled below the oil water contact. It was open hole below the oil water contact.
Because that's structurally high, underneath that is San Andres rock, not water. Do you understand that?
I don't understand your question. There's water in the rock. We're subsurface, it's all rock.
The water that would be attributable to the oil water contact. You're making the point that this well got close two of these got close to the oil water contact and one went below. Don't you need to know if that well is structurally high? Is that Grayburg well structurally high?
Yes, those, particularly the 262 and the 239, yes, they are structurally high.
And because they're structurally high, what does that mean about any water underneath them that would be associated with an oil water contact?
There could be, there's Grayburg below the oil water contact.
At those wells?
Yes.
Based on whose pick?
I guess based on my pick or Goodnight's pick.
Will you tell the
Are you
commission?
saying that those wells drilled into the San Andreas?
Those are Grayburg wells that are
Yes.
very high on structure.
Yes.
Then, will you tell the commissioners about your work to identify what was the oil water contact in the Grayburg at the EMSU?
Yeah, so the oil water contact was defined in the unit documents as -325. Dr. Lindsay has said that the oil water contact falls in between -325 and -350.
That was your methods? As a geologist testifying as an expert in this case, that was the method you used?
To define the oil water contact, it was defined. I just read the documents. I didn't have to define it. It was defined by the operators of the field.
Would Chevron be a reputable operator?
Yeah.
Chevron here in its 1989 technical report, you're welcome to read the top if you want, but I'm focused on the second paragraph. The original oil water contact, OWC, in the Arrowhead is not known. Will you read the next sentence to the commissioners?
Well, this is talking about Arrowhead. This is not EMSU.
Read the next sentence, please.
Okay, I see it. Yeah.
Recent analysis of drill cuttings and core data on the western edge of what?
Oh, the EMSU. Okay, yeah, I see that.
Has resulted in an estimated original oil water contact in Grayburg zone 1 through 5 of what?
-550 is what it says here, but that was originally those. I mean, the oil water contact can come up over time. That's why they said it was at 325 when they unitized it.
Chevron would well know what the original oil water contact is, wouldn't it?
Sure.
With respect to the idea of weak aquifer edge drive and this, I guess, leaks into Dr. Buckwalter, as well as just communication. Do you see
Mr.
that?
Mr. Waymeyer, it's almost 3 o'clock. Why don't we take a 15-minute break? It looks like you're moving into a new area of questioning, so it seems like a reasonable time to break.
Perfect.
Okay, let's come back at 3:15. Ms. Novar, are you with us? I see you.
Yes, I am. How are you?
All
Ready?
right. Are the parties ready to proceed?
Empire is.
Yes, Mr. Hearing Officer.
And Ms. Apodaca, are we good in the back there?
Yes, we are.
All right, Ms. Novoa, let us know when we're back on the record, and Mr. Waymeyer, you may proceed.
We're on the record. The time is 4:15 Central Standard Time.
Mr. McGuire, this is a slide that you visited with Mr. Rankin over. Do you see that weak aquifer on western edge of reservoir is indicated here?
I see that text. Yes, sir.
Maybe I can short circuit some questions. Does Goodnight agree that there would only be a weak aquifer contribution from the southwest of the EMSU from the Goat Seep?
No, I would not agree that it is weak. It was able to climb to the top of the structure, so that's a pretty large vertical distance. So I don't think it's weak.
What is bottom water as opposed to edge water? What is bottom water?
Bottom water is water that comes up from the bottom as opposed to coming in from the edge.
So it would move from a deeper depth up to a shallower depth?
Yes, that's correct.
Let's see what your water expert says. Do you remember this slide from Mr. White?
Yes, I think so. I could reorient myself here, but I remember seeing this. Yeah.
And I want to help orient the commissioners. Do you see T1 prime is over here on the west side of EMSU?
Oh, do you see that? Well, it's significantly farther west than EMSU, but yes.
Then you move through the cross section to T1 is on the east side of EMSU, and it crosses through EMSU.
I do see that.
And so this gets hard to follow because the east and west are backwards. But do you see on Mr. White's slide, T1 prime is on the west, it's on the right side?
Yeah, I see that. Yep.
And he offered testimony to the commissioners about the idea of concern over the Goat Seep or Capitan Reef. Do you remember he actually testified on this?
I remember that. Yes.
And his point being that he indicated low K tight facies west of EMSU, indicating, quote, limited aquifer support.
Is the text box, was that added or is that his are those his words?
We added that from his sworn testimony in this case. You don't remember him testifying and explaining this slide that because of that tight facies, there would only be limited aquifer support from the west?
I would refer to Dr. Lindsay's testimony on that.
Doesn't this clearly indicate that there would be little or no Goat Seep contribution from the southwest?
That's not what Dr. Lindsay said, nor Chevron in a lot of their publications.
Let's talk some about that. On the left, do you see this is something you swore to? When asked about it at a hearing in 2000, Tracy Love, who's Mr. Love associated with?
Chevron.
One of the operators of EMSU, yes?
That would be correct, yeah.
What you swore to the commission was that when asked about it at a hearing in 2000, Tracy Love identified only edge water and water cycling through high permeability streaks as the only sources of unaccounted for water in the EMSU, not San Andreas water. I read your sworn statement correctly?
Yes.
You also say in his 1998 SPE paper also does not identify San Andreas water as migrating into the Grayburg.
Sorry, were you not finished?
Go ahead. That was your sworn testimony.
I was agreeing. Yeah, I was agreeing with you. Yeah.
And with respect to the testimony, I've looked. Did you attach any of the testimony you attribute to Mr. Love anywhere to the exhibits or papers filed in this case?
I believe I did, yeah.
Yeah, maybe I didn't find it, and Mr. Rankin can point this out when he gets you back. But let's look at least at the paper, which I could find. Mr. Love says the general lack of siliclastics to the southwest in the high energy shoal environment, where thick, porous, grain-rich parasequences tend to stack, has produced a more homogeneous reservoir that has more of a bottom and edge water drive component. Did I read that correctly?
You did, yes.
And he's discussing EMSU, isn't he?
Yes, he is. Yep.
And just like Mr. Bailey testified, and just as you testified to with respect to anhydrites, he's citing here EMSU being at a high energy shoal environment, shallow water environment. Yes.
Yeah, referring to the Grayberg. Yes.
Being different than the rock facies selection out of that Dr. Davidson used.
No, Dr. Davidson said that the Grayberg was high energy.
So if there's bottom water coming in, we know we're talking EMSU and we know we're talking about Grayberg. Where would bottom water that Mr. Love cites here have to come from?
So the bottom water that he's discussing, I wish I could draw it out for you. He's talking about bottom water coming up from the lower Grayberg off structure, as well as edge water coming in from the Goat Seep.
Okay, the bottom water is not San Andreas water. You've decided this is Grayberg water.
Yes, I think that's what Mr. Love was saying there. Yes.
Where does he say that?
I don't know if he says it here, but he definitely said it in his testimony at the division in 2000.
You've attributed many statements to Dr. Lindsay, a PhD geologist who spent a large part of his life studying EMSU. And you actually offered this slide out of his PhD dissertation. Do you remember highlighting the orange?
I do.
But you didn't highlight the yellow, did you?
I quoted it in my direct testimony. I quoted that language.
Another way that the upper San Andreas Formation fluids mix with Grayberg Formation fluids is by faults fractures connecting the two composite sequences. There have been places found in EMSU. So we know we're talking in EMSU, correct?
Yes, that's what he says.
Where faults fractures have allowed upper San Andreas Formation fluids to move up section into Grayberg Formation strata, which form vertically oriented plumes of upper San Andreas Formation water within the Grayberg Formation. These localities tend to be only associated with one well, indicating that faults and fractures are localized in small areas. I read all of that correctly.
You did. Yep.
But you still insist, even when you've placed this into evidence, that there's no evidence of communication between the San Andreas and the Grayberg.
Yes, primarily because he does not support that statement with any facts or data. And when questioned about that during his deposition and during his testimony, he couldn't identify a single well within the EMSU where he could make that statement to. He identified one well in the EMSUB, which is not where we inject. It's not in the EMSU.
You would have this commission believe that you know better about San Andreas communication with Grayberg than Dr. Lindsay. Isn't that true?
I'm saying if you have the data, show it, and he didn't.
Now, this was literally his PhD paper. You understand that?
I do understand that.
We're going to move on and talk about the lack of barriers here. You remember this slide that you went through this with Mr. Rankin earlier, right?
Yes, sir.
You asked this question, why would Chevron place the EMSU #1 at the top of the structure if this is true? Do you remember asking that question?
I do, yep.
You've never drilled an oil and gas well, have you?
No, I have not drilled an oil and gas well.
You've never operated oil and gas assets, have you?
That's not true.
You're not a facilities engineer, are you?
I'm not.
Let me see if this one explains. How about they located it because it was close to the existing EMSU central facility, as a matter of ease in operations. You don't have any operational experience for operators to be able to explain why proximity to central facilities are oftentimes the predominant and deciding factor for locations.
Well, if they truly believed that it was going to damage their production, why would they do that? That doesn't make any sense.
Because it was near their facility would be the easiest answer.
Okay, and to sacrifice the production, I don't think that's what a oil and gas operator would intend to do.
Isn't that what y'all are being sued for doing over in the Marston case in Crane County? They were quite Reeves County, they were quite upset that a SWD operator came to own their oil and gas wells because they were going to kill them.
Yeah, and we won that case.
Now, moving through your testimony, we're about to get to your barrier picking. You swear here that the white spaces contain hydrocarbon or salt water, right?
Yes.
And we've heard Dr. Davidson testify in here that he's actually calculated oil saturations all the way to the very, very bottom of the San Andres, all the way to the Glorieta, hasn't he?
Very, very minor bits that don't meet the standard for an ROZ.
This color thing that you've created, did you create this?
I did, yeah. You can call it a cartoon. It doesn't hurt my feelings.
My question is, did you use software to create this, or was it drawn by hand?
I used a software to draw, but yes, I drew it by hand.
Okay, so this was not something an algorithm created, or you put in inputs from log parameters. This was you hand drawing so that when the commissioners go back and they understand everything that's colored, you hand drew, right?
Yes, that's correct. It's my interpretation of the logs.
If we move over here, for example, to the Dawson well, you with me on the well? How thick is the Grayberg barrier according to you? If the commissioners want to know how big is the Grayberg barrier, how big is it?
The low porosity in the Grayberg, that would be so the colors represent low porous, low permeable intervals. So are you asking about the green in the Grayberg?
There's like no Grayberg barrier whatsoever at the Dawson well, is there? According to you.
Yeah, I mean, if you zoom in, I think I have a pretty thin one there, but there's a barrier in the San Andres there.
My question is Grayberg. I just want the commissioners to understand what methodology you used. Here, what you're telling them is that the Grayberg would have something less than 10 feet thick of barrier, according to you.
Yeah, the resolution's pretty bad, but I would agree with you that it's probably in the 10-foot thick range.
And in the Rhino, there's none at all, is there?
Excuse me, no, but there's clearly a non-porous interval in the San Andres.
My question is Grayberg. So you're not going to tell these commissioners that there's a mappable impermeable barrier that is at the bottom of that is Grayberg that goes all the way across the EMSU, are you?
Doesn't appear, not in this figure at least.
And for example, here, do you see the perf in your Rhino well that I'm indicating at?
Yes, sir.
We talked earlier about what acid does to rock. Did you put any acid in those perfs?
Yeah, probably. That's standard completion operation.
Hundreds of barrels of acid, didn't you?
Yeah, that's well, I don't know if hundreds of barrels went in that specific perf, but yeah, hundreds of barrels is used during completion operations.
It's actually a good point. You don't know which perfs the acid is going into when you pump it down, do you?
That's true. It usually goes in the highest perm first. And I do have information on that particular set of perfs there. That particular set of perfs does not take water, as shown by a downhole injection survey that we have on that well.
Why does the acid go to the highest perm first?
Because the perm is high.
Just because it can move, because the fluid can move through, right?
That would be correct, yeah.
Just like drilling mud, isn't it?
Yeah, but the acid is put under pressure, under higher pressure than the drilling mud is.
Okay, but again, you immediately said that the acid's going to go to the highest permeability rock first. And I asked, why is that? And you said, because it's high permeability. And I said, how would that be any different than drilling mud? And you don't have an answer for that, do you?
I do. The acid is done in stages with pumps at the surface.
Now, if I'm just illustrating how this works, if the commissioners indulged that there were barriers all over down here, you with me so far?
Yes, sir.
As soon as you punch perforations right here, you've created communication throughout the entire San Andres. And the best barrier on your best day that you could identify to stop fluid, we know we've got no Grayberg. It would possibly be what you've shaded in this little purple spot. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that would be true. But like I said, those perfs aren't taking any fluid.
Have you provided that survey to the commissioners as part of this case?
Yeah, it's a public document, and actually Empire reproduced that public document to us, so I know they have it.
To further illustrate this, many of these wells are open hole completed, aren't they?
Yes, those are the water supply wells, yes.
And so as you inject, even if you indulged all this idea of barrier business, that you've hand drawn in on cartoon, there's open hole completions such as this EMS 462, and all of the salt water you've injected, can get at least up to that shoe. Isn't that right?
Well, that well is plugged and abandoned.
Where's the plug?
Right above your cursor.
And that's my point, is all of this water is going to, and I'm just assuming you would be right on a single barrier, and we're going to have a lot to talk about on that. But if the commissioners indulge that all of this is barriers, you can tell them all of that salt water is going to go to at least right there, isn't it?
Yeah, in that well, but I don't think it's going to go into the formation at that location.
You've performed no study of that, have you?
I've looked at the logs, and that's a very, very tight interval. So no, I don't think that there's any perm in that interval that I've shaded as blue in that particular log.
Are you talking about raster paper logs?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever even digitized any of these logs? I mean, you're just truly looking at old paper, aren't you? As you're saying, that everyone should take your word that there's a barrier up here. You're working off of triple combo paper raster logs from decades ago.
Yeah, but it would be no different than the digitized version.
In many
I mean,
of these,
the digitized versions are built off of these paper logs.
you don't have digitized versions for the 462, do you?
No, I've never digitized the log. No.
Again, I just want the commissioners to understand what you've done here. Like for the 462, as you assure them that there's a barrier up here, this is you picking porosity and permeability off of a paper raster log.
That would be correct.
What was your methodology for calling a barrier?
So generally I used about a 7% cutoff in using the density log.
So just 7% porosity?
Yeah, for the logs that I had densities on, I had a different methodology for the resistivities.
So if it's purple, do you understand why Empire's frustrated? If it's purple, what is the methodology for calling it purple if you're going to bring it in and swear to it?
Just answered that question.
7% porosity.
That's what I did originally, yes.
And again, this is your chance as we're in the methods bucket. If there's any other methods to calling something purple, have you now had the opportunity to tell the commissioners about that?
Yeah, I would maybe modify that a little bit going forward after I got the core data. The core data shows that you can have porosities as high as 16, 17% and zero vertical perm.
Did you change the purple? Or if
No.
we're looking at purple, according to you, this is 7% porosity.
Generally, yes.
You've heard Scott Burkhead talk about 7% porosity. The idea that this is a barrier is insane, and maybe 4%. And we've got some really tight porosities measured in core with really high permeabilities, both horizontal and vertical. You've heard that testimony, haven't you?
I have, but I would refer back to the 679 core, and it shows a really competent confining layer, which correlates with this interval that I'm showing as purple.
So again, as you move, I just want to make sure the commissioners understand this methodology now that we know that purple is 7%. These wells are 2,700 feet apart. The Goodnight Dawson to Sosa is 3,000 feet apart. These are half a mile apart, yes?
Yep, approximately.
And the logs that you're using, none of this was spectral gamma, was it?
You wouldn't pick a barrier using spectral gamma ray in this carbonate setting because there's no clay in this system.
Okay, so the question is, all you had was old paper triple combo logs, except for possibly on your Goodnight wells. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I mean the log quality in the 1980s was sufficient. Yeah, there's no issues with those logs.
Now, again, continuing on this idea, how far into the rock would one of those logs see?
It would be at at very near wellbore.
3 feet?
It depends on the tool.
How many feet? These are logs you used as your methodology and data relied upon. If the commissioners want to know, when you're mapping purple in your cartoon, how far out does the log tool see? 3 feet, 4 feet? How much rock are you seeing right there?
It's very near wellbore.
3 feet?
Yeah, I'll go with you on 3 feet.
And you can see that what you've mapped as purple barrier, these are not correlate. They don't go well to well to well. They're chopped up. The thing looks like a tiger, side of a tiger or something, right?
Yeah, other than the one at the top.
So how on earth are you mapping purple out here thousands of feet from where you saw something on your tool and telling the commissioners about 7% porosity or not thousands of feet away?
I'm correlating between the logs, which is a standard geologic method of correlating logs.
Where in literature might we see that you would define a geologic barrier by 7% or less porosity? Where can I find that?
So the 7% was originally used off of different core porosity permeability cross plots that we found for the San Andres.
Now, my question is, where in geologic literature would a scientist say, if you've got less than 7% porosity, you're good, that's a barrier? I just want to know the author. Who's the author?
It would be it's data from porosity perm cross plot.
I'm not talking about data. I would just like a geology professor, a treatise, a textbook that would say if you've got 7% or less porosity, that would be an effective barrier to fluid flow.
It would be field specific, and we used San Andres porosity perm cross plots to come to that 7%.
As we continue to talk about, but you came up with your 7% before ever analyzing the core, didn't you?
Well, we looked around for core and for San Andres core for the data that was available to us.
The question is, you mapped 7% porosity before. If you're trying to make it seem as though you picked this 7% off of core, the truth is that you picked the 7% and created your purple cartoon, and then later you got some core. Isn't that true?
Yeah, we got additional core data for the EMSU as part of this case, and it was very helpful, and it showed some interesting relationships between vertical perm and porosity.
But
Like I said,
go ahead.
Like I said, the 679 shows that you can have porosities as high as 16, 17, 18% and have zero vertical perm.
Okay, but I just want the commissioners to understand your methods and your data. When you map the purple that we've got, that we're looking at here, that you did it without any core. Is that true or not true?
We did it without core specific to EMSU, but we had published papers that discussed San Andreas core, and that's what we utilized.
As we continue to talk about just the methods here, why would Goodnight have spent the money to make a perforation and acidize something that you now say is a barrier? Do you see where I'm indicating is that, I mean, there's numerous of these, but this one's an example. Why on earth would a saltwater disposal operator do that?
Yeah, I wish we wouldn't have spent the money there. For those earlier wells, unfortunately the drilling engineer picked the perfs without consulting with us, and I wish he wouldn't have done that.
This is another example. You've picked a barrier and y'all put a perf right in the center of what you now say for this commission's a barrier.
Yeah, I wouldn't pick that perf today.
You said you picked the purple cartoon off of logs. What log did you look at right here to pick this purple cartoon?
Just correlating those from the next nearest just to make the drawing complete. I'm just assuming it's the same thickness in the 460. If I had the log that went that deep, I would obviously analyze it and change that given what the log told me.
You're saying it's nearly 1 entire mile away, and that there is no barrier that would correlate across those.
There may or may not be. I don't have any. If I had wells that went that deep in between those, I probably would have used them. But no, I just kept the thickness constant and drew them over there to complete the picture.
I just asked you and you said there may or may not be. You were referring to a purple barrier right here?
Yeah, you would have to have the log that went that deep and I'm sure it would change, but we can see that those lower intervals were at least correlatable between, for sure, 2 logs. Yeah.
So again, as these commissioners take, if they're going to accept it, make decisions for 58% state of New Mexico owned minerals and nearly 20% BLM minerals, and a project that Empire's opined on to $5.5 billion in cash flow. Some of the purple you're saying is maybe it could look like this here. That was your method?
Yeah, it was an interpretation.
Well, it wasn't an interpretation because you didn't have a log there, and the closest well would be nearly 1 entire mile away.
Yeah, I used the other logs that I had information for, saw that they were correlating, and drew them as a constant thickness. Well, if the thickness might not be the same, the data is not there to say it is or it is not.
Well, in fact, it doesn't correlate. If you look as an example, the only log you would have would be the banks here.
Mm-hmm.
And as you move to the right, I think that's east. It ends at the Dawson. It doesn't correlate across the EMSU, does it?
Well, I'm talking about those lower zones.
Also places you have no log whatsoever, but you were fine shading it purple. Is that right?
Yeah, it correlated in those 2 logs that went to the base of the San Andreas.
On what, like again, I just want the commissioners to understand that this is just pure cartoon cocktail napkin coloring.
Objection argumentative.
It is argumentative. Why don't you move on to your next question? That's sustained.
Why would you draw this? You see this little point right here? On what scientific, thousands of feet away, why would you draw this little point here? On what data would you have drawn that?
I'm correlating between the two logs, and we can see that there's a little bit of porosity that shows up right there where we don't have 3 low porosity intervals. One of them seems to somewhat pinch out somewhere in between those 2 wells.
As I move over here to the left, and again, this is your cross section you chose. This is the EMSU 460. This would be another example of that open hole completion where you know the salt water being injected by Goodnight is going to come all the way up here to the top of this shoe, nearly into the what you've identified as Grayberg. Isn't that right?
Yeah, but I don't think it's going to go out into the formation.
What studies have you done about the integrity of these old plugs or the effect of the high TDSs, chlorides, sulfates on these old plugs?
I have not done a study of that, but I have no indication that our water has made it to that particular well either.
Well, under your correlation, wouldn't it have had to have gotten there?
Not necessarily.
Have you ever mapped where your water is going?
We have not done a full plume analysis.
Wouldn't that be highly relevant to the OCC's decisions here? The saltwater disposal operator mapping the plumes of the saltwater it's injecting?
Maybe, but no, I have ideas of where I think the water's going, but I haven't done the analysis.
I'm going to come back and talk more on the core. We're going to look at the core together later on this idea that we would map these with 7% porosity. To just illustrate your cross section, have I done the horseshoe correctly? We would start up at the 460. You move down to the banks, you move over to the Sosa, you move to the Dawson, then up to the Rhino, then to the 462.
Yes, sir.
Again, so instead of doing it on the cross section that I've just picked the closest ones to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, you can see we're going to go 460, 462, and we're going to actually measure in a linear fashion as opposed to this horseshoe. Doesn't look like any of your purple barriers correlate across, do they?
It looks like the top one does.
Okay, and again, this is 7% porosity. And so that the commissioners understand that this is how close you can tell the commissioners, you know, the water is going to get to what you call Grayberg, isn't it?
Yeah, in those particular wells, yes, it will get that close in those particular wells.
If
the water makes it to those wells.
Here we've put the banks 17.1 and the 462 next to Grayberg. The idea of a barrier. Did you use the 7% in the Grayberg too?
I believe so. I'd have
Wouldn't
to get, I think I used a 7% from all of it.
Wouldn't logic say because those rocks are different, you would have had to have a real methodology employed by a geologist? It would be something different than 7% based on the core analysis out of the Grayberg. How on earth could it just happen that 7% works for Grayberg rock and 7% works for San Andres rock?
Well, most of the analysis was based on the San Andres. The lithologies are we're in carbonates in both of these, so it could probably apply to the Grayberg. When you get up into the shallower section of the siliciclastics, yeah, maybe you'd use something different, but that wasn't the point of this cross section.
So are you telling the commissioners that your alleged barrier mapping up in the Grayberg you really have no idea because you didn't prepare this methodology of 7% based on Grayberg rock?
I still think that 7% is good for the Grayberg carbonate.
Did you perform any study on core to suggest that would be appropriate for Grayberg rock? Yes or no?
I did not, no.
So we know all the green is pure guesswork, don't we?
Not necessarily.
Same for Glorietta below. Did you analyze the type of rock in the Glorietta or did you just use 7%?
I think I used 7% down there as well.
You can tell the commissioners that the idea of a barrier in the Grayburg, there is not a continuous barrier in the Grayburg according to you, is there?
At what interval?
How about at the Rhino 17-1 in the EMSU, your saltwater disposal well? If the OCD wanted to know back at that stage, or the OCC wants to know today, Mr. McGuire, is there a barrier at the bottom of the Grayburg in the Rhino 17-1? You would tell them there's not.
No, I did not put a barrier in the base of the Grayburg in that particular well, but there's a barrier that isolates our disposal reservoir.
This will be the last time I hit this, but again, just so the commission understand, here, you've got a perf this close to what you're calling Grayburg. How many feet is that?
I don't know, you'd have to zoom in so I could count it, but like I said earlier, that perf is not taking any water.
You put acid in it, didn't you?
Yeah, we probably did, and it probably didn't take very much.
Now, again, the question is, how close is that perf to the Grayburg?
I don't know, 50, 60, 70 feet, something like that.
Did you take any core when you drilled the Rhino 17-1 to see, as you just call this 7%? And again, the methodology is just, if it's 7%, as far as I'm concerned, commission, this is a barrier. You didn't have any core here, did you? And you didn't purchase any core when you drilled it?
We did not acquire any core data when drilling these wells, but we utilized San Andreas porosity and perm cross plots that was from core to understand what we thought was a barrier and what wasn't.
And those porosity and permeability plot, we're going to look at the actual core data and photos of core here in a little while. You can tell the commission those porosity and permeability cross plots are all over the place. We saw that in Mr. Burkhead's data. We saw Dr. Lindsay discuss that within the core that you have in the RBEL and the 679, porosity and permeability plotting, those are all over the place. True?
Yeah, and for the entire core data, yes, that would be true. But for the interval that is that we've defined as our permeability barrier, the core is consistent at very, very low perms. Vertical perms, I should clarify.
This log is not going to tell you anything about permeability, is it? On your best day, the log is telling you something about porosity.
That would be true.
How do you, as we see in the 679 core, that low porosity can have very high permeabilities? How do you know that for this little interval right here, that's not the case?
I think you just use the data that you have available to you, and like I said, the data that we have available to us shows that that interval is very, very low vertical perm.
You're talking about a log.
I'm talking about the core data.
How many core across 15,000 acres? How many cores did you study in coming to this conclusion?
I have the one core that is in the field that penetrated that, or that cored that interval. There's one.
Being that this is the state of New Mexico's Grayburg oil that we're talking about, don't you think that's a really big assumption for a geologist to make?
Yeah, I used the data that's available to us, and there's no indication that our water has gone into the Grayburg.
Now, does the OCD tell you where you can put your perfs, or as long as it's within the permitted interval, that's okay?
My understanding is that you can only perf inside of your permitted interval.
Right, but anywhere in the permitted interval, that's okay?
That's my understanding.
You see the blue, this is what you've actually permitted, for example, on the Rhino well?
Yes, that's what we permitted, yes.
So literally today, what you told the OCD when you got that rhino permit, you with me so far?
Yes, sir.
We've got, according to you, there's no Grayberg barrier. And you told the OCD it would be perfectly fine and they should give you a permit that would allow you to perforate a saltwater injection well at the very tip top of what you call San Andres. Isn't that right?
Yeah, it's pretty standard that you permit the entire formation that you're looking to inject into.
Wouldn't you agree that if you perfed within the top of the interval, for sure your salt water's going into the Grayberg there?
Not necessarily, but but there's no perforation there.
Everybody's relying on your good geology work and your honor to not stick something within the permitted interval. I'm sure, let me re-ask it. I'm just trying to figure out how on earth could you go to the OCD in good faith and tell them that you should be able to place a perf right there based on your geology work, that they should approve that and that would not threaten oil production in the Grayberg? How do you do that?
Like I said, pretty standard that you permit the entire interval or the entire formation that you're going to be injecting into.
Why on earth would you put, if the commissioners to believe this, why would Goodnight, a disposal company, put saltwater perfs in the middle, right in the middle of what you now want to say to this commission is a barrier?
Well, I didn't do this this particular figure. This is a republication of the figure that was done in the original Piazza permit, and I drew it differently than Mr. Drake did in this, and yeah, like I said, that those two perforations where you have your cursor at right now, they're not taking any water.
Hold on, let's take this in pieces because I think we've landed on something. You said you and Mr. Drake have different ideas on where barriers would be?
Yeah, we clearly in this particular well, we have a different interpretation.
Does Mr. Drake have more experience than you?
I mean, he worked longer than I did. Yes.
What methodology did Mr. Drake use?
You'd have to ask him.
That didn't concern you in coming to this OCC and offering sworn testimony. It did not concern you that your 7% porosity methodology did not match what a more experienced geologist at Goodnight had determined?
Yeah, and actually, in fact, it looks like the vast majority of that log is less than 7%.
So are you telling me there's actually
that interval right there? So yeah, it looks like we're pretty close to having the same methodology, although I drew a little bit of a porosity in that where the density is coming over very, very slightly.
we may be just landed on something else. Are you telling the commissioners that part of what you've shaded purple in your cartoon is greater than 7% porosity?
In this particular one?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is just a republication of the one that was used in the original Piazza hearing.
So as we try to get our arms around, what do we do with Mr. McGuire's testimony? We've got your shaded purple, allegedly what's going to protect the Grayberg oil. And my question is, as we look at shaded purple, some of it is even higher than 7% porosity, which is what you explained to me to be your methodology earlier. True?
Yeah, I can see one, I don't know, maybe that's 3, 4, 5 feet that looks to be above 7% in that particular interval, and that's the interval that I did not shade in those other ones, but Mr. Drake did in this particular figure.
So is what we're looking at not your work? This was done by somebody else?
This one was done by Mr. Drake. That is correct.
Are you swearing to its accuracy?
I am. Yep.
But it's different than the other one that you just showed.
Not by much.
Yeah. And again, why These perfs were not selected by Goodnight willy-nilly. Mr. Drake, the more experienced geologist, saw something that made him want to put perfs there.
I don't know if Mr. Drake picked those perfs. Like I said, I think it was actually the drilling engineer that picked those perfs without consulting with the geologist, and that's one of the reasons he no longer works for us.
Do you see? Is all of this supposed to make Empire and the OCC feel good about what y'all are doing right now in the San Andreas unitized interval? That you fired the guy who picked some of these barriers?
Mr.
not
Hearing
the
Officer,
barrier. No,
that's
not the
a
barrier.
objection on that question. That's kind of a character attack, argumentative question that is improper.
Sustained.
As we continue to talk about the coloring here, what is gray and what is purple?
Gray looks to be in this log limestone, and purple is dolomite.
On what methodology was dolomite determined to exist versus limestone?
So in that particular log, you can see what's being colored limestone is where the neutron and the density curves are very, very close to each other.
So, did you see this in core that you would have like these? To me, it looks stratigraphic. Did you see it in the core that you would have stratigraphic intervals of limestone that are this thick as compared to stratigraphic intervals of dolomite?
The core didn't reach this interval of the San Andreas.
And if you don't have spectral gamma, how are you down there picking rock types then?
Because that's a typical characteristic for a neutron density curve of what limestone is.
This is again off of your exhibit. Do you see these are all identified as water extraction within the Chevron EMSU 461 water supply? It's all right in what you've identified as barrier. Do you see that?
No, that's all open hole, and he was just trying to show that entire open hole interval was for water extraction. No oil ever came out of that interval. It's all water.
Has this been a prolific water supply well?
Yeah, I would say so.
If your barriers were to be believed, like 85% of this would be a barrier. Wouldn't this be like the worst water supply well in all of New Mexico?
Well, no, I'm seeing that the porosity in that interval just above your cursor is quite high, and that's probably where the vast majority of the water was coming out of that well.
I just want to go back to this one to illustrate something real quick. If the commissioners saw fit, now that we've heard about your data relied on in your method, to place any emphasis on this thing right here, the purple cartoon, the green cartoon. You with me so far on the assumption I'm using?
Sorry, define your assumption. I'm sorry.
If the OCC saw fit to rely on any of your work here on this exhibit B9, you with me so far?
Yes, sir.
You can tell them even under the methodology you described, there are purple spots that have greater than 7% porosity, but you shaded them purple anyway.
I don't believe so, no.
There's nowhere in here so for example, there would be nowhere in here that would have greater than 7% porosity or over here.
You'd have to zoom into that login for that particular interval.
Right here. Are you telling me there is no where we've seen the variable porosities in core and variable permeability? You're telling me none of this is over 7% porosity?
There might be a few intervals in there that are above 7%, but in aggregate, that entire interval is an effective permeability seal.
Now, and so again, I just want, as the commissioners take this thing back and they don't have us here to fuss and testify anymore, the purple has shaded purple instances where you know for a fact do actually have greater than 7% porosity. Isn't that true?
It would be very, very, very small intervals on the order of a few feet that might have some porosity that's higher than 7%, but in aggregate, I still feel comfortable calling it a barrier.
Where before have you ever been retained as an expert to testify on barriers?
This would be the first time.
Um, can you tell the commissioners, as a matter of geology, there's no way for formation to cross each other like this?
What do you mean cross each other? I don't understand what that's trying to depict.
How on earth could this strata here, where I'm indicating here in gray, somehow cross the purple strata? How does that happen as a matter of geology?
Cross, I don't understand what you're trying to depict here. I don't understand what you mean by cross.
Do you see the arrows, you see the purple, you see the gray. How on earth does the gray come across from east to west and then somehow cross the purple lithology? How does that happen?
He's not showing those two intervals as being correlative. Yeah.
Here, you've actually offered the commission contrary testimony on barriers out of the same exact well. Are you aware that you've done that?
Yeah, that appears, and like I said, the one on the right was not prepared by me. That was Mr. Drake, and I stick by mine.
Mr. Drake got it wrong?
A slight difference of interpretation.
Well, slight difference. It's literally 30-something% of the barrier that Empire and this commission is supposed to take heart in, that the Grayburg is safe.
Yeah, and given the core data that I have now, I would probably draw that as being a continuous barrier like Mr. Drake did.
Because you didn't, in terms of your barrier work in this case, you didn't use core.
Oh, well, we used core, San Andreas core porosity and permeability cross plots. We then got the core data from the 679 after these figures were built, and yeah, so given that new data, I would change my interpretation of that that cross section a little bit.
Do you know what a spinner tool looks like? Have you ever laid hands on the tool that would go down the wellbore on a spinner tool?
I haven't laid hands on it, but I know what it looks like.
What does it look like?
It's a tool that has little propellers in it that measure how fast fluid is flowing past that.
Does it also take temperature?
Sure does.
And so when the temperature falls off, we know that it's no longer seeing the hot salt water moving past it, right? If temperature falls off, the salt water you're injecting is hot, isn't it?
Depends on the season.
Okay. Well, since we can't talk temperature, let's talk on just the tool spinning. If the tool stops spinning, we know that water is not flowing past the little helicopter propeller, right?
Yeah, that's correct. That would be that no fluid is moving that tool.
On the Rhino well, that's the one that after a great series of questions, you finally agreed that even Goodnight agrees y'all are injecting into the upper San Andreas. That's that well, right?
Jackson, mischaracterization of prior testimony. Mr. McGuire testified that upper perf was not receiving any water.
Rephrase, Mr. Waymeyer, sustained.
Mr. McGuire, you now you don't agree that Goodnight is injecting in the upper San Andreas in the Rhino well?
Well, it depends on how we're defining upper San Andreas, but the top perfs of the Rhino are not taking fluid.
With respect to this spinner survey, you can tell the commissioners that you know that all of the fluid that Goodnight is injecting in the Rhino is happening in those upper perfs, the upper third of perfs, isn't it?
No, I think the vast majority of the water is going in right there where that temperature deviation is 48, 45 as it's depicted on this graph. I think probably 90% of the water is going in those perfs.
That's right here. You understand that? Where 48, 45 falls? That's right here on the dotted line.
48. Yeah, it's those perforations right there where your cursor is, right? I mean, I don't see the depth column for you. Yeah, so it's probably, yeah, it's those two perfs right there. That's where that water is going.
How do you know it's not going into the three above it?
Because, well, I know it's not going in that top one because the spinner survey is constant across that one. There's probably some minor fluid going into the next two, and then the rest of the water is going into the two perfs that are above your dashed line there. And really, looks like hardly any water, if any, is going into the perfs down in the lower part of this well.
And again, to just put a bow around it, you can agree on the Rhino, for example, as the commissioners see all these lower perfs in the Rhino, based on your spinner survey, you know that all of the water is going into the upper sets of perfs, not the lower sets of perfs. True?
No,
Objection, absent, Andrew.
I guess I'd refer back to my testimony on that. It's going in those two perfs right there.
It's not going into these perfs at all.
There might be very, very minor amounts that are going in those perfs. There's none going in that top perf. Looks like very little water is going in those next two, and then the vast majority of the water is going in the following two.
This is what a spinner tool looks like.
That's a version of it. I've seen others.
I want to talk now about the only core that you brought to this commission to talk about was the 4335. Is that right?
Well, yeah, that's the one that I pulled from Dr. Lindsay's testimony. That's the only core photo that I saw that was from what I've defined as the confining layer.
With respect to how the core report measures vertical permeability, is that matrix permeability?
Generally, yes. I guess it depends on how they measure it, but that's generally correct.
So to just illustrate this concretely, when the core report, we're going to look at vertical permeability, if this is matrix permeability, which is what core labs measure, it's going to be this part of the rock right here. It's not giving consideration to permeability created by fractures, is it?
Well, it depends on where they measured it. I think it's safe to assume that the core permeability plot is intended to be representative of the rock that they're trying to measure.
This is why I asked you in the first place. Is it matrix permeability or is it fracture permeability?
Well, if you have a highly fractured reservoir, you would want to know the permeability that you're trying. You want to understand how the reservoir is behaving. So whether it's matrix or fracture, you would want to have an understanding of how the reservoir is behaving, and you would measure it as such.
And again, the core report is matrix permeability, vertical permeability, isn't it?
I don't know if it actually defined that in that core report.
So you're saying you don't, as you look at the core, you don't even know what the vertical permeability figure is that you're looking at, do you?
I would assume that they're trying to understand the reservoir, and it's representative of the reservoir that they're working in.
As we talk about rock being fractured, if a rock is fractured or has fractures in it, that's going to create permeability, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you chose this confining layer over here, is that right?
I did.
And I think the point you were making with this 4335 slide was that there was some cementing in there, right?
Yeah, like I said, that's the only core photo that I have from that interval that has very, very low vertical perm, and we can see that the fracture is completely cemented up and no longer conductive of fluids.
Earlier, you helped the commission. I know you're not a chemist, but you confirm acid dissolves cement, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And for this part of the confining layer, you had no core at all because it was so fractured up, they couldn't get the core out.
That's not what it said, but yes, I agree with you that that core was not recovered from that interval.
Why was the core not recovered from the interval that you've called a confining barrier?
Don't know. It didn't say.
Wouldn't it make sense as a geologist that it was so fractured up it wouldn't come out?
Maybe, but not necessarily if there's other explanations.
Just so that the commissioners understand how much acid y'all are putting in here. See, this is in gallons. So at those upper perfs, this is 2,000 gallons, 47 barrels, 23 barrels, 23 barrels, 47 barrels. At those upper perfs in the Rhino, the one we saw how close to the your Grayberg, the Rhino was perforated. You can tell the commissioners you put in hundreds of barrels of acid up there, didn't you?
And it didn't help the injectivity whatsoever.
And you haven't performed any studies on how acid affects the particular rocks in the San Andres, have you?
I can tell you that it didn't help us put fluid in those intervals. There's no fluid going in those intervals at the top of the Rhino.
If the commissioners want to see on other, do you see here that in terms of gallons, tens of thousands of gallons of acid you've pumped into the San Andres on these various wells that you've drilled, isn't there?
Yeah, but I would convert that to barrels so we can use constant units here.
Now, we've talked about Dr. Lindsay is the only one who's prepared a core study. And what you want to call confining layer, he prepared a core study on that interval, didn't he?
He did?
Did you bother to read it?
I did.
What did it say about your confining layer, about the rock properties there?
I believe it said that there was fractures, but there was no discussion of if they were conduits to flow.
Isn't a fracture definitionally a conduit to flow?
No, we just looked at a fracture that's totally cemented up in that interval.
Were you able to find any other photos of core that would have had a cemented up fracture? Or was that the only one?
That was the only one that Mr. Lindsay, or Dr. Lindsay put in his testimony.
I'm asking about
That you
you
could
as the,
see.
you're the saltwater disposal operator pumping millions of barrels of salt water into the unitized interval of the San Andres. Did you go looking as part of any of your barrier work or confining layer work here to look at other photographs of the core to see if there was cementing in the fractures?
No, I looked at the photos that were that I had available to me.
Was that anything other than the 4335?
Yeah, there was some fit photos from that were kind of photos of the core box, but the resolution when you zoomed in on it in the documents that I had were you couldn't see them.
Were they this good of a quality?
They were not.
So you've never, for the confining layer, this is the first time you've ever actually looked at good quality photos such as these for that interval?
That would be correct, yeah.
And you understand that these cores, 679 and the R-Bell, are publicly available to be checked out from the BEG. It's at the library. Anybody can go there and look at the core if they wanted to. Photograph it, whatever they want to do.
Okay.
But Goodnight's never done it.
We have not, no.
As a geologist, you can look at, now that I'm showing you the actual core photos for your confining interval for the very first time. Do you see that this is full of fractures, that this stuff is so cracked up? As a geologist, you can look at this and see that what you've decided to call confining area is cracked up every which way you can get. This goes all the way to 4351. Are you going to tell these commissioners that your confining layer is not all kinds of cracked up?
Well, in this particular core photo, it's hard to tell the difference between coring induced fractures and natural fractures.
So you would want to look at the description from the core lab company, right? About because they'll differentiate between what would be a extraction created crack versus one in situ, right?
Yeah, sometimes they would, but for the 679, that analysis was not done by Core Lab or whoever the core whoever analyzed that core.
Bob Lindsay, Dr. Lindsay analyzed that core.
Yeah, and he did not analyze this depth.
He literally did. I just showed it to you. This is his. This is.
He said the bottom of his
core
fracture study was 4180.
goes all the way to 4360. So have you not even read his core description down to 4360?
It says it very clearly in his rebuttal testimony that the base of his fracture analysis was 4180.
As a geologist, we're all here with our eyes. Will you agree that now that you've laid eyes on photos of the core, that this is very cracked up rock throughout the entire, what you call confining layer, except for the part that was so cracked up they couldn't get it up the hole?
Well, again, yeah, there's no description here as to which ones are coring induced fractures and which ones are natural. The other thing is that they're pretty short. I think Mr. Lindsay said that the largest ones that he was able to find, not in this interval, but in the intervals that he did look at, was 3 feet.
If there's fractures that communicate with fractures, if again, you're calling this thing barrier at 7% porosity, but if it's all fractured up, water's going to move through that even before applying CO2 to reduce viscosity.
Well, it depends on if the fracture is open. Look, there faults faults, which are essentially giant fractures, are structural traps for oil fields. Doesn't mean just because there's a fracture there doesn't mean it's conductive of fluid.
Do fractures also solution widen with time in fluids such as salt water or hydrocarbon moving or CO2 miscibility?
Not salt water. If salt water is supersaturated, it won't dissolve the rock.
Now let's look at the actual core description that goes with the interval you selected as confining layer. You remember you picked out 4335?
I do, yep.
What was the vertical permeability?
43.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So,
That's right.
so
Yeah.
apples to apples. I just want these commissioners to understand your methodology.
Mhm.
The only one you looked at by way of a photo was 4335. That's because Dr. Lindsay gave it to you.
Mm-hmm.
You today used that as evidence for these commissioners as part of your confining barrier to make your case. And you said, look, it's got cement in the fracture. You remember that testimony?
I
Yes.
sure do.
What is the vertical permeability for the one slab that you showed to the commissioners?
It's 10 millidarcies, as I stated in my testimony, but the foot above it is 0.03. Then you have a pretty high permeability, which I assume is measuring a fracture, given that high permeability, and it's 1 foot. And then, this interval that I've called the barrier is an aggregate of very, very low permeability.
The
Vertical permeability, I should clarify.
on your porosity, we talked about your 7% cutoff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All of these are higher. I say all of these. The majority of these are higher than 7% porosity as well, aren't they?
Yes, and it's very, very low vertical perm. That's what I was referencing when we were discussing this earlier.
Earlier, there was conversation about anhydrite, bedded anhydrite, and you said, there's lots of anhydrite. Will you just stop me when we see anhydrite in this core description?
Yeah, you're going pretty quick here. I'd
Sure.
want some time to go through this.
Have you done it before?
I did it one time.
Did you find a lot?
I found a few descriptions of that. Not on this page, apparently.
Okay, we're ready to go to the next one?
Sure. I see some anhydrite on this page.
Is this the one you're talking about?
That's the one that I see right now. Yep.
Any others?
That's the one that's described in this one.
Now we're in your confining, well, we've been in your confining barrier, but any on here?
Nope. I guess I would point out that I didn't say it was exclusively anhydrite. I said it was also tight dolomite in my confining layer, which every single
Okay.
one of these is dolomite.
So while we've got the core, what on earth, and you know your testimony's got anhydrite all over the place in your written testimony. What on earth would be the basis from looking at core for you to have sworn to these commissioners that there's anhydrite, that there's enough anhydrite to make a barrier?
That was calculated from the logs.
So this would be an instance of Goodnight getting its rock type wrong by using triple combo logs.
Not necessarily, no.
What on these? So again, if the idea is Empire, take heart, your oil is safe and the state of New Mexico's oil is safe because we have bedded anhydrite. You can tell the commissioners there is zero evidence of that in this core report. True?
I didn't use the term bedded anhydrite.
Now, what do these capital F, what does that mean? What does that stand for?
Might want to go to the legend here, but I'm assuming right now, maybe I shouldn't assume anything here. We could go to the legend that describes that.
As a geologist, shouldn't you have these down pat? Is the answer without looking at a legend, you have no clue what a capital F means?
Well, different core companies use different nomenclature. That's why each of them publish their legend on each one of their core reports.
How about if a lowercase v and F, do you have any clue what that means?
Same answer. I have an assumption of what it means, but
before we go down,
I don't want to stand out on a limb here and say that I for sure know that exactly what that means.
Before we go down and look at the legend, the notes to the test, you can tell the commissioners that in the descriptions, there are VFs and Fs all the way through the core in what you call confining barrier, confining layer, isn't there?
It would appear so, yes, sir.
What is a capital F?
Randomly oriented fracture.
What moves through fractures?
Depends if the fracture is conductive of fluid, but sometimes nothing can move through the fracture.
What is VF?
Predominantly vertically fractured.
Which would accord with just using our common sense and looking at the core with our eye, with what we observe there, yes?
Well, I would just refer back to the vertical permeability.
Which again, in low porosity situations, some of that vertical perm is really, really high, isn't it?
In this interval, it's predominantly very, very low.
Well, here, for example, is 2% porosity with 2.1 millidarcy vertical permeability. You know, fluids are going to move through permeabilities like that, aren't they?
Yeah, for sure. But then it's going to go to the foot above it and not move anymore.
How if the commissioners want to know how laterally extensive the core is outside of the 3-ish inches, how far are they seeing into the rock? When you assure them with these high porosities that you've chosen, a 7% cutoff, that it just goes 1 foot above and cuts off, how much rock are you looking at in that core?
You're looking at the diameter of the wellbore.
3-ish inches?
Yeah, that sounds about right for this well. But there's no evidence that our fluid is going through that interval.
Right. I'm glad you brought that up because as we talk about here, Dr. Lindsay, I'm not going to dwell on this one. You know, Dr. Lindsay's PhD came to the conclusion that there is fluid moving from the St. Andreas into the Grayburg, didn't it?
Without any supporting data to make that claim.
In the 1989 Chevron paper, They came to the conclusion in 1989 in the technical committee report that although siliclastics between each zone generally prevent vertical communication in some localized areas, they don't act as permeability barriers.
Which
When the
document
barriers-
is this from?
1989 Chevron's technical committee report.
On which field?
Which one do you think this is?
It feels like the Arrowhead unit.
It says Arrowhead at the top. But again, this is saying, you would agree with me, the Arrowhead is in close proximity to the EMSU, isn't it?
It's not the MSU.
What question do you think I just asked you?
I heard the question.
Why won't you
yeah,
answer it?
It's, I don't know, a few miles.
Very close, yes.
Depends on your discussion or your definition of very close.
Well, the EMSU itself is 7 miles or more long if you drive one direction to the other. How about you just redraw the boundaries in the direction of the Arrowhead?
I'm not following.
The technical committee report on Arrowhead also came to the conclusion that the San Andreas and the Grayburg were communicating. Isn't that true?
That's what that document says, but we don't inject into the Arrowhead.
The Love paper we looked at a moment ago cited bottom water coming up into the Grayburg, didn't it?
Not from San Andreas.
If the commissioners just need to remind, what formation is below the Grayburg?
It would be the San Andreas, but there's nowhere in there that it says the bottom water stemmed from the San Andreas.
This is now the 96 International Annual Conference and Exposition, the NACE paper. You've seen this paper before?
Yes, sir.
The Eunice Monument South Unit, EMSU, has historically experienced barium sulfate scale deposits in many producing oil wells prior to field unitization and initiation of the present water flood. Wouldn't that be explained by the sulfate-rich waters of the San Andreas migrating into the Grayburg?
That's what they stated in that paper, but there's sulfur in the oil in the Grayburg itself. So there's an alternative source of sulfur that could cause that barium sulfate scale.
We're in the 1996 Chevron paper conclusion here. Although the drilling was confined to the Penrose and Grayburg, apparently some San Andreas water was finding its way into the wellbore of these wells and resulted in a barium sulfate scale barite and deposition problem. This is another Chevron paper identifying San Andreas water getting up into the Grayburg.
That's what they postulated, but I just offered an alternate explanation that could cause that. The other thing is that paper is not peer reviewed. That was just from a presentation that was given at a conference.
Help me with the peer reviewed paper that Goodnight's offered the commission that says there's no communication.
Well, Lindsay's PhD thesis says that the San Andreas is an aquiclude and that the pressure differential proves that those two formations are isolated from one another. He does qualify that with that paragraph that you stated before, but when we pressed him on that in this hearing, he couldn't identify a single well. He has no backup data for that statement, and the only well he could identify that occurred in was not an EMSU.
This is going to be the last question I have on that one. As when the commissioners go back and read your sworn testimony where you say over and over and over, no evidence, no evidence, no evidence. We've gone through, according to you, this is we're still in no evidence territory. Is that right?
No direct evidence, yeah.
Okay. Y'all talked a lot about the EMSU SWD #1. Do you see here graphed the barrels of water injected historically going back to 1995?
I do, and I disagree with the statement up there that it's compatible water. It was known to be incompatible, so they've been putting incompatible water in the San Andreas for since the 1950s.
As we talk about incompatibility, Didn't you have to replace, now you didn't produce this document to Empire. We had to go find it. Didn't you have to replace an entire Christmas tree as part of a workover on your well in the EMSU because within 5 years, the entire Christmas tree had corroded so badly from your water that it was unusable?
I don't know if that's accurate. I do know that we replaced a wellhead, but I don't know if the reason was because it was so corroded. It's pretty, I mean, you replace this equipment after so long, as a prudent operator does, just to ensure that everything is mechanically, that it has mechanical integrity.
Okay, so you've got water chemistry and compatibility and all these opinions, although you're not a chemist, and you don't know why y'all had to replace an entire Christmas tree within 5 years?
No, that's not in my purview here.
An entire string of yellow band coated tubing within 5 years? That's pretty strange, isn't it? To have to replace an entire string of coated yellow band tubing within 5 years?
No, not necessarily. No, that's pretty standard.
Want to continue going through some of your testimony. You've sworn the water supply wells significantly dropped the pressure within the San Andres due to the very large volumes of water produced. So we're talking in San Andres. Now we're moving on to talk some pressures here, okay?
Got it.
Water supply significantly dropped the pressure. So you're saying that in the San Andres, by taking water out, that significantly dropped pressure?
Yes.
Yes. Would you agree by Goodnight then adding water back, that's going to significantly increase pressure?
No, that's not what the data is showing.
How on scientific earth could that work? That withdrawing water significantly drops pressure, but adding it back doesn't increase the pressure?
Yeah, so after getting some new data, it looks like the San Andres was naturally under pressure to begin with, but there was water taken out that did drop, that contributed to the pressure differential that we see between the two zones. But like I showed in the data, our injection is not changing the bottom hole pressure significantly.
At paragraph 53, you swear that the depletion of the San Andres aquifer from the EMSU 460 and 462 water supply wells, along with the other 4 historical water supply wells in MSU, Goodnight Midstream's active and proposed disposal wells near the former water supply wells have very low operating pressures, creating an ideal situation for disposal injection operations. Again, what you're saying here is that there's low pressure because the water has been sucked out, right?
That's what I said at that time, but some new data has come to light that slightly changes my opinion.
You say it over and over again. This is paragraph 69. With the depletion of the San Andres aquifer from these 3 water supply wells, along with the other historical water supply wells in MSU, Goodnight's proposed disposal wells near the former water supply wells will have very low operating pressures as confirmed by existing disposal operations. Again, this part of what you were making the case for was the reason this is so ideal is that Empire and earlier operators have dropped the pressures drastically by sucking water out, right?
That's true. That's what I said at the time.
Earlier, you remember showing the commission this slide?
Yes, sir.
And I think you said one of the important things about this slide was the amount of time that the wells were shut in and not injecting over here. Is that right?
Yeah, I was specifically talking about the Piper, the pink line.
But again, to you, the amount of time that the well was shut in, not injecting, was significant because why?
I guess, can you restate the question? I think I got a little lost there.
Yeah, why was the amount of time that the well was shut in significant in your testimony to Mr. Rankin?
Because the longer the well is shut in, the more that the near wellbore pressure can equilibrate with the larger aquifer.
So the commissioner, these are all taken with a fluid gun, right?
Yes, sonic tool, yes.
Do you know how that fluid gun is calibrated or works?
I do, yeah.
How?
Shoots a sound wave down the pipe, and a sound wave bounces back, and then you can calculate where the fluid depth is based on that travel time.
What's it counting?
Probably seconds per foot or microseconds per foot, time per foot.
Do you know what the waves are bouncing off of for you to be able to tell how deep it is?
The fluid level.
Have you ever used a pressure gun before?
I have not used a sonic tool, no.
And so in terms of describing to the commissioners how mechanically these fluid levels were measured, you don't know by way of mechanical explanation, do you?
I guess you're implying that I got something wrong, but I would rely on the experts that run that as their business, and that they accurately report the data back to us.
Who are those experts here? Names?
I'd have to look up the service company provider that we use to shoot these fluid levels.
W-2 W-2 employee or 1099 contractor?
I don't know what their tax situation is, but it's somebody that we hire that does this for a living.
Who's the name of the contractor that does it out here in EMSU?
Don't have it off the top of my head here. I'd have to look at the invoice. I think the company is called Downhole Diagnostics, if I'm remembering that correctly.
And with respect to their calibration technique, you have no idea.
I guess not. No, but they seem to be doing good work for us.
The EMSU 211, that RFT measurement, you insist that is in the Grayberg, is that right?
How we've defined it, yes, it's definitely not in the water management zone.
Okay, so you're not disputing that that the RFT measurement in the 211 that we've spent so much time talking about was taken in what is geologically the San Andreas Formation, are you?
No, it's not in the water management zone. It's not representative of the disposal zone. Everything below that mark acts as a different reservoir than everything above it.
I just need an answer. San Andreas, the San Andreas Formation, we can all agree there is a San Andreas Formation in New Mexico in the EMSU.
Yes, we can agree with that.
Do you have a position on whether the 211 measurement was taken in that San Andreas Formation, yes or no?
Well, the chronostratigraphic pick for the San Andreas is very difficult to pick. So if it's in the chronostratigraphic San Andreas, possible, but it's not representative of the disposal zone. Like I said, everything below our line there, what we've called San Andreas, acts as a different reservoir than everything above it.
Here, as we talk about Empire's pick of San Andreas, do you understand that in the OCD well file, right this second, for the EMSU 211, that the I'm sorry, on the EMSU 1, I'm right here on the EMSU 1. Do you understand what I'm talking on?
Yes, sir.
That the OCD pick is at 3942. It's way up here,
I'll take your word for it.
which would place, based on the OCD file for the EMSU #1 well, would place that 211 measurement within the San Andreas Formation with the OCD.
Yeah, that may or may not be true. Again, it's the point of the figure here is to show that it's not in the reservoir that's being utilized for disposal.
With respect to the depletion that we've spent a lot of time on this 211 slide, I assume you're familiar with it.
Yes, sir.
Other than communication with the reservoir above, what on earth could explain this depletion?
Like I said, that's not representative of the different reservoir that is being utilized for saltwater disposal. We call that interval Grayberg, and that interval may or may not be in communication with the Grayberg above it, but it's definitely not representative of our disposal zone.
Okay, I just want Goodnight on the record as you as its corporate representative. The answer to the question of what on earth explains that pressure depletion other than communication with the reservoir above, is your answer you have no idea?
Yeah, I'll go with that.
You pick on Dr. Buckwalter. Have you ever prepared a simulation model or a material balance simulation such as Dr. Buckwalter?
First off, I'm not picking on anybody. I'm just looking at the data inputs into. It's been a long time, but yes, I have prepared a reservoir simulation model, but been a very long time.
Obviously, Goodnight had the human resources and economic resources to prepare a model and rebuttal and or to just be helpful to this OCC if it so chose. True?
We contemplated doing that, but we came to the conclusion that the data was not satisfactory enough. The input data that we had available to us was not satisfactory enough to bring to the commission and stand behind. There was too many unknowns.
Did you contract with anybody to even try? Let a professional that has experience preparing simulation models such as these try and come back and tell you the data is good enough or not? Yes or no?
We had those conversations.
With who?
John Macbeth.
Did you hear his testimony that he wasn't asked to prepare one?
Objection, mischaracterization of prior testimony. Mr. Macbeth actually testified on this directly and said that he made the decision and recommendation that it was not sufficient data to make a reservoir model.
Okay, I'll sustain the objection based on that representation.
I'll move on. Now, on your slide, you just pointed out, according, you said you fuss with Dr. Buckwalter. You say he's missing 370 million barrels of water injected to San Andreas. That was your slide you showed the commissioners today, right?
Yeah, that's correct. That's the difference between what I was able to get from records, and then I summed up what he had in the materials that he provided to us, and there was that discrepancy.
But that's not fair at all, is it? Because if you subtract the saltwater disposal volumes not included in the model from the water supply volumes not included, there's actually only a shortage of 24,828,860 barrels. Isn't that right?
Sorry, you went really quick there. Can you slow it down and walk me through that?
If you subtract saltwater disposal volumes that are not included in the model from the water supply volumes that are not included in the model, that leaves the entire model short by a mere 24,828,860 barrels. Do you understand that?
I think I follow you there. So what water supply volume water supply volumes are you using to come to that number?
The ones within the bubble proximity that's modeled right here in the graphic on rebuttal exhibit B47.
Yeah, I think Dr. Buckwalter. So what's the volume that you used? 300 or 461?
Saltwater volumes in the model.
Water supply volumes.
Water supply volumes in model 461 million. Water supply volumes not included 390 million barrels. For a total water supply volume of 8,852,000,000.
Okay.
And the point being here, y'all want to, you want to fuss over missing injection volumes. If you put the water supply volumes, it's only off by 24 million barrels. And at the $200,000 barrel disposal rate a day that you guys are at, volumes would be made up in a mere 124 days. Does that math look accurate?
Yeah, I have no reason to disagree with the math there, but Dr. Buckwalter is missing, I can't remember exactly how many he had, but there's more than 60 in the area, and he's missing, I think he had 20, maybe 30 of those. So he's missing more than half of the wells. That has a material impact on what the model is going to show you.
As we talk about cumulative balance, I just want to get Goodnight on the record. Do you agree that historically this graph accurately identifies the injection volumes leading up to about 1986, then the withdrawal volumes to 2010, and then volumes put back up through 2025?
Is this specific to the EMSU boundary?
It is.
Okay. I guess, yeah, I don't have any reason to disagree with that, but I know that going back to Dr. Buckwalter, he did not include any of those volumes pre-1994.
So again, I just want
Mr. Waymire, let me just break in here. I know you're wrapped up in your cross-examination, but the goal here today is going to be to finish at 5, so we've got a little less than 10 minutes. So just bear that in mind and tell us when you get to a point that will be a logical place to break your cross-examination for the day.
very, very good. I'll be finished at 5 or quicker. Thank you for the day. Mr. McGuire, I'm just trying to get, if the commissioners, as we talk about pressures, want to know where are we historically in terms of water taken out and water taken back, you would agree that we are just right now getting back to, as we talk about material balance, a volume of water put back that was sucked out over the last almost 40 years.
Objection to form. Mr. Waymire was confusing in the question pressures and volumes.
Mr. Waymire, rephrase the question, please.
You understand, we're talking on pressures right now, Mr. McGuire. You understand that?
Yes, but I would say that this graph is not showing pressures.
Understand, we're talking about volumes with this particular question, which was the question.
Okay.
The question is, as we continue the pressure discussion, the volumes taken out of the EMSU are only right now at this moment in time getting back after being put back by Goodnight to the original volumes. Isn't that true?
That would probably, yeah, I have no reason to disagree with that, but I do disagree with using that graph as a proxy for pressure because the data does not support that it is a proxy for pressure in this instance.
Would you agree that a pressure bomb is the most accurate pressure you're going to get down in a well?
I think you can get very close with a static shut-in pressure.
You're talking about at the wellhead?
Yeah, if you know the density of the water, you can calculate the hydrostatic, and that's equal to the bottom hole pressure, so you can get very close.
What is most accurate, a pressure bomb or something else?
I've seen pressure bombs and calculated from hydrostatic that are the exact same number, assuming you have the right inputs on your calculation.
I understand you're not an educated engineer. Are you really telling these commissioners that you think there's something more accurate than a pressure bomb?
I think a pressure bomb is very, very good when you can run it, but you can get basically the same answer calculating the hydrostatic.
Now, as we continue to talk on volumes, there's been a whole lot of talk about, gosh, Goodnight injected into the San Andres. And that was actually part of its legal right as the mineral owner and as the owner of the oil unit, isn't it?
Sorry, say that again.
We have had to hear
Goodnight
about
there.
I'm sorry. I'll strike that. We have had to hear about Empire has injected into the San Andres. Isn't that its legal right as the mineral owner who owns the leases and also the owner of the oil water flood unit?
Objection calls for a legal conclusion about what rights Empire has.
It does, Mr. Waymire. You're the one that wanted this witness's expertise limited. He's not a legal expert.
I wish he'd been
Sustained.
limited. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sustained.
Mr. McGuire, so that there's no misleading the commission, we've looked at this graph. Do you agree this graph is a fair and accurate representation of the volumes that have been injected into the EMSU by Goodnight just since January of 2020?
Yeah, I have no reason to disagree with the graph.
In the blue, that is others, which would include Empire, right?
Sure.
Historically, and until Permian and some of our other recent folks started injecting, quote unquote, others was also very small in relation to what Goodnight has done, weren't they?
The rates were small, the cumes are very large.
If the commissioners, and in terms of cumes, we're only now, right now, getting back to the volumes that would have been sucked out, right?
Yes.
If the commissioners wanted to know on this graph how much Empire would represent, it would be about the width of one of these little gray lines. If you placed it on this graph, you've looked at this close enough to know that you couldn't even see it. It would be about the width of the gray line, isn't it?
Objection, Mr. Waymire is testifying.
Overruled.
Yeah, the rates in the MSU SW number 1 were very small, but over the cume got to over 4 million, which is less than other commercial saltwater disposal wells in the unit.
You said the cume of Empire got up to 4 million?
Yeah, the cumulative disposal volume in the EMSU SWD number 1 is, if I'm recalling correctly, just over 4 million, I think.
Which would be like in 1 month, if you take the 2 mile halo, that's 1 month of what Goodnight does, isn't it?
Yeah, it's significantly less than what we do. That's correct.
So why have you spent so much ink and testimony out of your experts in this case to the OCC about Empire has injected water in the San Andreas?
A few different reasons. One, the precedent was set. 2, they're injecting into their own alleged ROZ. It doesn't make much sense. There's been disposal into the ROZ, in that ROZ, alleged ROZ interval for a long time. Just that I guess the main answer is that the precedent was set.
I'm at a place to transition. So if breaking now pleases the tribunal, I can do that. And I certainly have some more for tomorrow morning, but I will be completed within the morning.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Waymire. I think everybody could use a little bit of rest, so we'll be back. Let's go off the record for the day and reconvene bright and early tomorrow morning again at 9 o'clock. Mr.
Okay.
Chairman Rosatos, anything further from you for the day?
No, thank you, everybody. We appreciate it. We'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Thanks, everybody.